Chapter 507. Gadotsi nodded. After all, they had fought for so long, and it would be unreasonable to leave now. The original team of 3, plus Karna, became a team of 4. The 4 of them headed toward Denver. Although Karna was with them, it still couldn't stop Gadotsi's burning heart. Gadotsi stared at Karna's eyes, which were no longer emitting sparks, and asked curiously, "Speaking of which, Karna can release a noble artifact with his eyes. It's really a divine artifact. It's no big deal. A true hero kills with his eyes," Karna replied casually. After all, he was a man of few words. Only you can say something like that. Wu Ming smiled helplessly at the side, then continued. "I can't kill enemies with my eyes. I can only say that Karna is worthy of his reputation." Gadotsi and Matthew were amused by Wu Ming's teasing. In the face of Wu Ming's teasing, Karna didn't know what to say, so he didn't say anything. Although it's not very nice to interrupt you, you're about to go deep into the enemy's base. Is it really okay to look like you're going on a field trip?" At this moment, Roman's voice suddenly came from Gadotsi's bracelet. This voice, is it the magician with the magical ability? Although he couldn't see the person, Karna remembered Roman's voice. The magical ability Karna mentioned was the remote virtual screen. It seemed that many servants were interested in this kind of magic. This magician is right. We do seem to be too relaxed. Of course, Karna had always been a steady person. He was just Wu Ming and Gadotsi. Mashu also had a dignified look on her face, so she wasn't any worse than Karna. "Senpai, I think the doctor is right. We really do look a little relaxed." Matthew whispered. "You're right." Gadotsi smiled awkwardly. However, Wu Ming shook his head. "The fact that Tachika doesn't have any psychological pressure is the best support for us, so it's not wrong to relax a little." Even though Gadotsi basically didn't have the ability to provide support. "Plus, we look very relaxed, but haven't you noticed that the ghosts that were supposed to be attacking us are all gone?" After repelling Ibaraki Boy, there were no more ghosts that came to attack Wu Ming's group. "It seems that they don't think it's going to work no matter how many ghosts they send," Karna analyzed. "However, compared to them not coming down to die, I'm more inclined to believe that those ghosts have all disappeared." Why do you say that?" Gadotsi questioned Wu Ming's words. Yes, it's time for the genius." Suddenly, a Mona Lisa appeared beside Wu Ming and the others. Wu Ming had seen Da Vinci before, but Karna hadn't. Therefore, he was quite interested in this newcomer. Karna narrowed his eyes. He could feel that this was a servant. Da Vinci's servant? Matthew said with some confusion. "Yes, it's the genius, Matthew." Roman went to the toilet. Da Vinci looked at Matthew with a smile, then began to explain. "Although it's strange, the detector on my side has clearly detected that something is amiss ahead." The ahead mentioned by Da Vinci was a place like a cliff in front of them. Da Vinci's servant, but there's nothing in front? Gadotsi was also very puzzled. "I forgot to mention this, Matthew. We can say that we have arrived in Denver." With that, Wu Ming walked toward the cliff. Gadotsi and the others also followed. The place where Gadotsi was located was not a cliff, but rather a flat area at the bottom of the mountain. Of course, even so, its average altitude was still 1,600 meters above sea level. A huge fortress similar to a Japanese-style ancient city is located below. That is the city of Denver. It can be said that the city of Denver is at the foot of the Rocky Mountains. I was a little worried about what to do if there was a mudslide or something. After the improvement of the genius, Chaldea's instrument has adapted to the high magic density environment. There should have been a lot of life in front of us, but after you defeated Ibaraki Boy, all those lives disappeared. Although Chaldea's instrument is used to detect magic, the magic in this world is transformed by life, so it can also detect magic. Anyway, whether they were killed or used as sacrifices, most of the ghosts in the strange city of Denver have disappeared. That is to say, the remaining magic waves belong to the servants, right? Wu Ming asked. "That's right. This is a battle between heroes without their servants. Anyway, only you and Karna can participate in the battle. Matthew still has to protect Tachika. So that's it. I still have to continue improving the instrument here. Good luck, Tachika." After that, Da Vinci cut off the communication. As expected of Da Vinci's kin. As always, he feels reliable. Gadazzi smiled awkwardly. Obviously, reliable was a derogatory term. Don't worry. I think she probably thinks that Karna and I are here, so Da Vinci can rest assured that we will protect you. You should know that both Karna and I are not simple people, Wu Ming comforted. Let me say something first. Karna raised his hand. I don't have the ability to protect others. This armor is the only thing that can protect others. However, because Sadrik and I are the only combatants here, I can't easily hand over the armor to you. After all, if Karna had given his armor to Gadazzi, then he would have been much weaker than Gadazzi. After all, not only did he have to release the fatal sun wheel, but he also had to give up the golden armor to Vasvi Shakti. Without the golden armor, Karna would no longer be the invincible Karna he used to be. At that time, he would have to be like an ordinary warrior and not let himself get hurt easily. Because without the golden armor, Karna was neither invincible nor able to recover from his injuries, nor could he use the essence of the sun to heal the foreign objects in his body, so he was much weaker. You don't have to worry about that at all. Matthew is very reliable, Gadazzi said to Karna with a smile. As she spoke, she gave Matthew a thumbs up, which made Matthew's face instantly turn red. However, Matthew did not hesitate to protect Gadazzi. I won't let any senior come to any harm. Looking at Matthew's determined and powerful eyes, both Wu Ming and Karna smiled with relief. It's your blessing to have such a servant, master. Karna chuckled. The praise made Matthew's face turn red again, and Gadazzi looked at Matthew happily. Because Matthew is my lovely junior, Gadazzi hugged Matthew as she spoke. Son, senpai, wait a minute. Mashu, who was being held, could only struggle weakly. In that case, I'll lead the way first. Wu Ming nodded to Karna, Gadazzi, and Matthew, then stood at the side of the mountain. Mythical Yggdrasil. Chapter 508. Even Wu Ming knew that a town could not be built directly at the foot of a mountain, so Wu Ming did not think that others did not know about this problem. Moreover, the Denver city in front of him was completely built in Japanese style, and it was a huge city. It did not look like an ordinary city in this era. This was undoubtedly the trump card of a servant, a noble phantasm. Therefore, the way Wu Ming chose to open the way was definitely different from the usual way. Facing the Japanese city of mysteries, which only had a few servants left, Wu Ming's way of opening the way was to directly blast open the gate with his noble phantasm. With the release of his noble phantasm, Wu Ming was not in a hurry to throw out the holy spear. Instead, he held it with both hands and kept it hidden, constantly gathering mana and holy light. This huge amount of mana. Karna was a little shocked. This amount of mana was already comparable to all the mana of a first-class servant, and it was even slightly more than that. Moreover, at this moment, Wu Ming's attack was still enough to compete with Karna's solar wheel, Vasvi Shakti in terms of explosive power. The reason why they only competed in terms of explosive power was because Karna's solar wheel, Vasvi Shakti, was an extremely special noble phantasm. It did not mean that it was only effective against gods, but it had an additional effect on gods. Moreover, if Karna released his noble phantasm and did not release it, he was afraid that his solar wheel, Vasvi Shakti, would be enough to overpower Wu Ming's attack. However, this was a joke. How could anyone let their enemy charge their noble phantasm? However, Wu Ming had been charging for so long, and no one came out to stop him. It seemed that his opponent really did let Wu Ming do whatever he wanted. He really did not know what his opponent was thinking. Karna was a little helpless, but he did not expect anyone to stop Wu Ming. He was just disappointed in his enemy. But then again, would the Japanese city be able to defend against Wu Ming's relic? Anyway, they would find out soon. Karna was looking forward to seeing how Wu Ming would complete the relic's relic. After all, if the noble phantasm was to explode here, he would be able to survive with his golden armor. However, Matthew would not be able to protect Gadazzi, as he would not be able to activate his noble phantasm in time. Gadazzi would definitely be blown to smithereens. Just as Karna was about to take off his golden armor and put it on Gadotsi, Wuming finally moved. Wuming raised the shrunken version of the holy spear in his hand, which was white on the outside and black on the inside, in front of him. This was the effect of the holy spear being compressed to the extreme. It was so white that it was black, and it had shrunk to the extreme. The reason why he did not throw it on his shoulder like a javelin was that Wuming was not sure that he could control the holy spear that was about to explode in his hand. Therefore, Wuming put the holy spear in front of his chest as if he was holding a ceremony. Then, Wuming recited the oath. The next attack is the real legend. Accept the judgment. Because the name of the relic had already been recited, there was no need to release the real name again. Then, Wuming threw the holy spear into the sky. The holy spear, which was so white that it was almost black, penetrated the clouds. It was like some kind of attack that fell from the sky, and it flew away without a trace. Then, like a divine punishment, the sky and earth changed color. In the sky above the Japanese city of mysteries, black clouds were constantly rotating with faint thunder and lightning. The vortex in the middle began to shine like hidden thunder, which made people frown. Gadotsi and Matthew looked at this scene and were both stunned. This was a lot more than the previous battle. Of course, the servants in this Japanese city of mysteries must have noticed it too. Then, Wuming snapped his fingers. Pa! In an instant, white light covered the entire land. After some time, Gadotsi opened her eyes. She rubbed her eyes that were uncomfortable because of the sudden strong light. Then, Gadotsi began to look around. Matthew was holding a shield to protect Gadotsi, while Karna was in front of Matthew, using his body as a shield. Matthew did it subconsciously. He did not know that Wuming had calculated the range of the attack, and he did not know that the damage of the relic would not affect here. However, some of the wind swept over. That was why Karna chose to stay in front of Matthew and Gadotsi when he knew that there would be no actual harm. This move is too cruel. Gadotsi held back for a long time, and that was all she could say. Karna nodded. Wuming's move was comparable to his Godslayer spear. It was quite destructive. However, Wuming waved his hand calmly. After all, no one came out to disturb me. This is a rare opportunity. If I don't accumulate more mana, wouldn't I be sorry? That was the terrifying thing about Wuming's spiritual base. It did not seem to be too powerful, and it felt no different from the previous servants' bodies. However, that was not the case. The interior of this spiritual base had been carefully modified by Wuming, and the modification took place in the root. It could be said that if Wuming wanted to, he only needed to accumulate power for a day and a night, and then use the relic to self-destruct. Then, the American continent, which was the singularity, would disappear. Wuming completely removed the restrictions of the spiritual base in the root. In other words, as long as it was an attack that could be achieved in theory, Wuming could do it now. Just like the self-destruct of the American continent mentioned earlier, if there was enough mana and he could control it, Wuming was fully capable of destroying the singularity. Wuming's cheating method was not what it looked like on the surface. Of course, part of the power provided by the Holy Grail was also part of it. Although the Holy Grail had always seemed useless, it was something that the Magic King used to confuse people. How could it be so simple? After Chaldea recovered the Holy Grail, he also nervously protected it. Da Vinci also studied it very carefully. Naturally, the Holy Grail could not be underestimated. Of course, Wuming was here to save the singularity, not to destroy it, so he would not blow up the American continent. Gadotsi and Matthew, who had just come to their senses, smiled awkwardly after hearing Wuming's words. Moreover, don't underestimate this city. Although it didn't completely block it, it can still be considered to have blocked my noble artifact. Wuming's words stunned Gadotsi, Matthew, and Karna. Gadotsi and Matthew were surprised that the other party could actually block such a terrifying relic, while Karna was surprised that there was a city that could block a relic that was comparable to his Godslayer's spear. With this thought in mind, the three of them looked at the Japanese-style city below. The originally gorgeous and dignified city had been damaged as if it had experienced a natural disaster. The outer city towers had basically collapsed, and the various pavilions and houses inside were almost completely destroyed. The entire city could be said to be in a sorry state. Only the palace-like hall in the center was still intact, but had lost its previous gorgeous and dignified aura and color, giving a feeling that it had lost its power. Let's go. My relic only destroyed the other party's relic. I'm afraid the servants on the other side did not suffer any damage. After Wu Ming finished speaking, Gadotsi and Matthew looked at each other and nodded encouragingly. Then, let's take the Holy Grail here today. In this way, the four of them moved toward the dilapidated city. Chapter 509. Because the distance was very close, the four of them only took a few minutes to reach the gate of the city. Looking at Gadotsi, who was still trying to figure out how to contact Roman, Wu Ming smiled helplessly. Because of Wu Ming's noble phantasm, the communication device that had been repaired was destroyed again. Because Da Vinci modified the communication device to adapt to the situation of high magic concentration, Wu Ming directly used super magic explosion on her and directly cut off the communication system. It was estimated that if they wanted to contact each other again, Da Vinci would have to further modify the device, at least to adapt it to the magic concentration of Kanzaki's atmosphere. No longer paying attention to Gadotsi, Wu Ming looked at the half-destroyed door and said thoughtfully, "To be able to do this, I'm afraid the other party used the Holy Grail." Karna nodded after seeing the situation. "I'm afraid that's the case. Otherwise, I really can't think of any defense that can block such a catastrophic attack." However, Wu Ming smiled slightly. He really did know of a noble phantasm that could defend against any kind of damage. King Arthur's scabbard, Avalon. As someone who was familiar with the story of King Arthur and had accompanied King Arthur for half of his life, Wu Ming naturally understood the power of Avalon. True name Liberation could produce an unparalleled defensive barrier that was like a layer of scales, and even the good separation sword might not be able to break it. And Avalon could also make the wearer never get hurt, and it was in a semi-invincible state. Wu Ming knew that Avalon would be accidentally lost, but because Wu Ming thought that Artoria needed Avalon more, he had always asked Artoria to carry it with her. Anyway, Avalon was not lost until Wu Ming left by himself, but from the ending, Avalon was still lost. Perhaps this was the will of the heavens. Damn it! If it weren't for the fact that Wu Ming had played his part, being a knight, how could Morgan Le Fay have been tricked by him? In a direct confrontation, Morgan Le Fay wouldn't have been able to defeat Wu Ming. Moreover, if Wu Ming's main body had appeared at that time, he would have been able to crush Morgan Le Fay with his little finger. Moreover, he wouldn't have needed any reason to do so. After all, if you provoked the Origin Dragon, would it need a reason to crush you? Of course not. The more Wu Ming thought about it, the angrier he got. He quickly took a deep breath and stopped thinking about it. Phew, Karna looked at Wu Ming in confusion, but didn't say anything. Ahem, let's go in. Wu Ming coughed and walked toward the door. As soon as they entered the city gate, Wu Ming realized that something was wrong. He immediately waved for Gadotsi to stop. The air here is highly toxic. Then, he immediately covered himself with magic power. Wu Ming realized that not only the air, but even the ground under his feet was full of poison. Strangely, the poison didn't spread outside. It was as if the city was an inherent enchantment filled with poison. Wu Ming himself wasn't very afraid of poison. However, the poison this time was a little different. Therefore, Wu Ming didn't dare to be careless. Sizzle. Although Wu Ming covered himself with a magic power shield, the poison in the air had begun to corrode Wu Ming's outer appearance. This poison is a little too strong. Wu Ming increased the magic power output of his magic power shield. Then I can't go in. Gadotsi was a little disappointed. Wu Ming looked at Gadotsi awkwardly. Do you really think this is a tourist attraction? Now, it's time for me to take action, Karna said. After all, Wu Ming had invited him to deal with the poison. Karna walked through the gate and waved his spear. The true sun fire burst out of his body and began to burn the poison. The ground was penetrated by Karna's flames and gradually turned red, as if lava was about to erupt. The air was also covered and burned by Karna's flames. "It's really working," Matthew said excitedly. However, Karna and Wuming didn't look very happy, because both Wuming and Karna could feel that the burned area was filled with poison again. This poison seemed to be inexhaustible. Even if one area was burned, the poison in other areas would fill in. Even the poison that filled in made Karna's flames burn more vigorously. Smelling the intoxicating smell in the air, Wuming said without hesitation, "This place is filled with the poison of fine wine. It's probably Shitendaji." As Karna burned, more and more wine fragrance came from the air. Cough, cough. Cough, cough, cough. Matthew began to cough. "Matthew, are you okay?" Gadotsi looked at Matthew worriedly. Matthew's face was purple. There was no doubt that he was poisoned. Wuming took out a bottle of potion from his golden ripple and threw it into Gadotsi's hand. "It seems that Shitendaji's poison has begun to spread. Matthew is poisoned. This is the antidote. Give it to Matthew." After hearing Wuming's words, Gadotsi hurriedly uncorked the potion bottle and carefully helped Matthew drink the potion. After drinking the potion, Matthew's complexion immediately improved. It had to be said that the game's products were all excellent. Detoxification was like a rule. Because of the characteristics of the antidote, Matthew was no longer poisoned. "Thank you very much, Senpai Cylinder." Matthew thanked Wuming. Hearing such solemn words, Wuming seemed to see Galahad. "Compared to Cylinder, I prefer you to call me by my other name." Matthew looked at Wuming in confusion. "I'm kidding. Matthew, just be Matthew. The rest is just a matter of people abandoned by time. Don't worry about it." To be honest, if Matthew really copied Galahad's words, Wuming would not be very happy. After all, being himself was the most important thing. Then, without waiting for Matthew to respond to Wuming's words, Wuming took out a few bottles of potions from his golden ripples and threw them to Matthew and Gadotsi. "Tachika, you and Matthew take these bottles of antidote and immediately return to the place where we were just now. The poison here will spread soon. It's not safe. Leave it to me and Karna," Wuming said solemnly. "Okay, I got it." Gadotsi also answered Wuming seriously. She also knew the seriousness of the matter. Just the spread of the poison was enough to poison Matthew. She was afraid that it would be very dangerous inside. As a qualified master, Gadotsi made a gesture of complete trust in his servant. "Then, I'll leave it to you. Cylinder, Karna, I need you to tell me the story of what will happen here." Gadotsi smiled at the two people who were already standing in the poison area. "No problem. Understood, Master," Wuming and Karna said without hesitation. Then, Gadotsi and Matthew, who had recovered, began to run away from the poison area. Wuming looked at Gadotsi's figure and touched his chin thoughtfully. It seemed that Tachika's poison resistance was not that simple. In this case, he did not have to worry about her safety. As for Matthew, he would be fine with a few bottles of antidote. Relieved, Wuming looked at Karna. "How is it? You should be fine, right?" Karna seemed to be verifying something, and flames burst out of his body. "Although I can't completely burn these poisons, they can't hurt me either. The son of the sun god was not just for show. Then let's go and find out the truth of all this." Chapter 510. This poison that defied common sense was able to block Wu Ming's precious artifact. They were clearly a power, yet they knew their place. This was what they were currently puzzled about. However, there was a more important point. They had to retrieve the Holy Grail and save this era. Therefore, it would be best if they could retrieve the Holy Grail without bloodshed and without any casualties on either side. However, from Lulu's previous attack and the current poison, it was clear that the other side had no intention of making peace. It could only be said that the heroic spirits were a group of super problematic characters who were bored in the heroic spirit palace. The reason why heroic spirits were called heroes or anti-heroes was that they were different from ordinary people, and these differences had long since established their identities as problematic characters. If they met someone they liked, the other party would instantly become brothers with them. However, if they didn't like the other party, they wouldn't need any fancy reasons. Just the simple reason of not liking the other party was enough to make them fight. However, It was precisely because of this casual nature that these heroes became heroic spirits. It was also because of the personalities of heroic spirits that Gadotsi didn't show any fear on this journey to save humanity. After all, Gadotsi held the fate of humanity in her hands. However, Gadotsi wouldn't complain or be afraid because she had Matthew by her side, a companion full of personalities on the road. Cough, cough. However, it was also because some heroic spirits were too individualistic that they stood on the opposite side of reason. At least, that was the case for now. Just like the female high school student in front of Wuming and Karna. Next, this road is blocked, Lulu said to Wuming and Karna kindly. Although she was also in this poisonous area, for some reason, she wasn't affected by the poison at all. As if she had guessed Wuming and Karna's thoughts, Lulu waved her hand and began to explain. Of course, Shitendaji's poison is very strong, and it doesn't differentiate between friend and foe. I'm also affected here. Of course, Wuming really didn't want to know. Then, Lulu's body slightly emitted a trace of magic, and a faint golden light attached to her body. It's all thanks to the Holy Grail. Holy Grail. Wuming could more or less guess what was going on. After coming into contact with the Holy Grail, he had temporarily gained immunity to Shitendaji's poison. Okay, then I'll leave this holy maiden, who also has divinity like you, to you, Karna. After Karna nodded, Wuming changed direction and continued to walk toward the central hall. No, wait a minute. Why did you leave just like that? Ling Lu Guzin felt helpless when he saw Wu Ming leave without paying attention to him. Whoosh, with the sound of the wind, Lulu dodged the spear, Karna, who was rushing to attack. You to me, Karna, you, to attack, Lulu's to me. Lulu's to say, Karna, Lulu to attack, to kills to hit full, you attack. Since you're an enemy, then let's fight. Karna, who had transformed into an aloof Adonis, didn't say anything else and swung his spear at Lulu again. Bang! A samurai sword emitting a golden and silver glow blocked Karna's spear. Lulu took out the Samantabhadra wisdom sword from somewhere and blocked Karna's attack. Since the Samantabhadra had already appeared, the Samantabhadra naturally appeared as well. A samurai sword emitting a golden glow floated in the sky. It was the Samantabhadra. The Samantabhadra split from 1 to 2, 2 to 4, and 4 to 8. In just a few seconds, it had split into hundreds of Samantabhadra. Then I'm going to get serious too. Take this attack, demigod hero of India. Ling Lu's previous carelessness was replaced by a solemn expression. Tenki aim, heavenly phantom rain. In an instant, hundreds of Samantabhadra fell directly in front of Karna and Lulu, causing a violent explosion. Boom, boom, boom. In front of him, Wuming heard the explosion behind him and glanced sideways. You should have no problem dealing with Lulu, right? Good luck, Karna. With that, Wuming sped up and ran toward the central hall. When he was almost at the front of the hall, a woman in a gorgeous blue dress that resembled a witch's costume appeared in front of Wuming, half kneeling. She had the same fox ears and tail as Lulu, but the fox in front of Wuming looked a little like a wife. However, if Wuming wasn't mistaken, she had 6 tails behind her. Although the fox looked weak, it had a lot of magic power in its body. Moreover, she had a golden glow on her body. There was no doubt that she had come into contact with the Holy Grail and obtained a temporary immunity. A second fox, in addition to your rather strong magic power, based on my guess, you should be one of the 3 great demons along with Shitendaji and Daitengu, Tamamonome. However, from what I know, Tamamonome should have 9 tails, but you actually only have 6. Saying so, Wuming looks towards the fox spirit who is standing in front of the main hall. To be honest, other than Tamamonome, Wuming couldn't think of anyone else who could have a fox spirit that was on par with Lulu, although he was curious why she was half kneeling. Yes, I've been waiting for you for a long time, Surrender-sama. As for the number of tails, it's only because I haven't recovered my strength. Tamamonome easily admitted her identity. Tamamonome seemed to be in a good mood. The 6 tails behind her swayed, and her body emitted a trace of mana. Ming frowned slightly and said, "This familiar mana. I'm afraid you're the one who saved Ibaraki Duji." Ming felt this magic power. It was the same magic power that appeared on the talisman paper in front of Ibaraki Boy. "Yes, you're right, Surrender-sama," Tamamonome said with a smile. He felt that this woman was getting stranger. Ming pondered. "Then if you can step aside, I think we can continue to talk like this." Although Ming didn't think that she would easily step aside. After all, she was one of the three great monsters of Japan, the white-faced golden nine-tailed fox. Moreover, it was said that Tamamonome was actually the incarnation of the Japanese sun god, Amaterasu. Those who were related to gods were not to be trifled with. Take Ling Lu Guzan, for example. Don't be fooled by her abnormal appearance. She was not someone to be trifled with. Ming didn't think that she was a simple servant who could successfully ambush his group and survive after being blown up by his noble phantasm. At the very least, this Tamamonome and Lulu Guzan weren't as simple as they looked. After all, the most important point was that Ming never told Tamamonome that his name was Surrender. She must have learned about Ming's information through some means. Ming judged. Fortunately, she didn't know Ming's name as the Root Dragon. Otherwise, Ming would really be shocked. Then, just as Ming was about to make the first move, Tamamonome spoke. Her words shocked him from another perspective. "Of course, Surrender-sama." Then, Ming looked at Tamamonome with a strange and unbelievable look. "Did Shitendaji know that you betrayed him?" "You may not know, but Shitendaji has left this hall." Ming was taken aback. "She left here? How rare." Ming instantly thought of a possibility. "Yes, it's what you think," Tamamonome said instantly. Ming didn't enter the hall. Instead, he immediately turned around and prepared to leave. However, as if he thought of something again, Ming stopped and turned to look at Tamamonome. "I have a question. Why did you tell me this news?" Tamamonome seemed to have heard the question she wanted to ask, and there was a smile on the corner of her mouth. "Because I want to marry you, Ming-sama." In an instant, Ming's eyes widened. Chapter 511. Ming's eyes widened, showing that his heart was not calm. After Ming finished releasing his noble phantasm, the sky had become cloudless. Ming's eyes sharpened as he was drenched in the sudden rain of the sun. Ming suddenly appeared in front of Tamamonome. Ming stretched out his hand and directly grabbed Tamamonome's white neck. However, the magical power attached to Ming's hand that was holding Tamamonome's neck showed that Ming was not joking. Even if she was a servant, she would not be able to survive if her neck was broken. "How did you know this name?" Ming's tone had a hint of murderous intent. That's right, Ming was not surprised that she wanted to marry him, although he was a little bit concerned about it. Cough, cough. Ming was surprised that she knew his name, Ming. Even among the people who knew him, there were only a few people who knew his name, Ming. In addition, the 3 extra holy grails at this singularity were arranged by the Magic King. Ming had to guess whether Tamamonome knew his name because of the Magic King. Or perhaps Tamamonome was simply a thug sent by the Magic King to deal with Ming. At this moment, Ming's mental power was completely released, and the range of thousands of meters had entered Ming's perception range. Ming's mental power was not only used to detect whether there were other enemies or traps around, but also to see if he had fallen into his opponent's illusion. Although Ming could be said to be immune to illusion, Ming was only immune to his own illusion. If it was not used on Ming himself, but used to change the surrounding environment, Ming might still fall into the trap if he was not aware of it. To make a simple analogy, if you put an illusion on a stone, in theory, let the stone think that it was a flower, then the stone would think that it was a flower, and then with the help of magical power, it would make people see that there was a flower in the original position of the stone. It was similar to a simple magic trick. However, now that Ming had completely released his mental power, he did not have to worry. The other party did not play any tricks. "I learned about your identity through touching the Holy Grail, Ming-sama." Tamamonome did not care about Ming strangling her neck, as if she trusted Ming, and smiled. "Holy Grail." Hearing Tamamonome's words, Wu-ming thought of such an example. But the other party did not come into contact with the Holy Grail, but with him. Back in Winterwood City, Stheno, the eldest of the 3 Gorgon goddesses, obediently submitted to Wu-ming because she came into contact with Wu-ming and learned of his identity. Strictly speaking, Stheno had the divinity of the Earth Mother, and Tamamo also had an extremely close relationship with Amaterasu Amikami. If Tamamo learned of Wu-ming's identity because she came into contact with the Holy Grail, it would not be unreasonable, compared to Stheno, who came into contact with him and learned of his information. Wu-ming felt that it was more reasonable for Tamamo to learn of his information because she came into contact with the Holy Grail. Although Wu-ming didn't have the same knowledge as Karna, he also monitored Tamamo every move, including a series of details such as breathing, every hair moved by the wind, and so on. In addition, Wu-ming found that there was indeed no other servant-level magic power in this hall except for the servant-level magic power in front of him. There was no doubt that Tamamo did not lie. Wu-ming slowly loosened his hand, holding Tamamo neck, and looked at Tamamo deeply. I still can't completely believe you. If you want to prove yourself, then you have to stay here. If I find you elsewhere, I will immediately regard you as an enemy and kill you at all costs. How about it? After all, if the other party lied, then it was most likely the Magic King's trick. In that case, it was a risk to let Tamamo stay here for a second. That was why Wu-ming said that he would kill Tamamo at all costs. After hearing Wu-ming's words, Tamamo nodded happily. There was no doubt that Tamamo agreed. No problem. I will wait here for my husband to come back and pick me up. I wish my husband good luck. With that, Tamamo bent her upper body, folded her hands, and lay on the ground like a Japanese woman saluting her husband. Facing Tamamo, calling him husband, Wu-ming frowned. This is only the first time we've met. You've only learned about me from the Holy Grail, and you've already taken the liberty to say that you want to marry me. I will definitely reject such shallow love. Don't call me husband anymore. Marriage without love is meaningless in Wu-ming's view. Wu-ming is not a man who can't walk away when he sees a beautiful woman, and he won't readily agree just because the other party is throwing herself at him. After all, Wu-ming still has a few love debts. How can he add one more? Yes, I understand, Selen-sama. This time, Wu-ming nodded with satisfaction. She didn't call him Wu-ming, but Selen-sama. This means that she is a smart person. Wu-ming likes to deal with smart people. Then, you can stay here. You didn't lie. I will come back and thank you. With that, Wu-ming immediately turned and left. I wish you good luck. After Wu-ming's figure disappeared, Tamamo smiled again. Hee, such an excellent husband will be taken away by others if I don't hurry. I am a Tamamo who wants to be a virtuous wife, and I have already given you a greeting gift, my husband. Although she said that, Tamamo eyes were a bit scary. Unfortunately, Wu-ming had already left and didn't see this scene. On the way back to the city gate, Wu-ming began to think about the information he collected so far. According to Tamamo information, as well as Wu-ming's own investigation, Shitendaji was no longer in the Central Hall. There were 2 reasons why Shitendaji set up this poison city. First, she needed to make Wu-ming think that she was in the center of the poison city. After all, if they were to fight, Shitendaji's domain would be very advantageous. However, Wu-ming forgot that last time. Even after Shitendaji left, her noble artifact could still operate on its own. This time, it might be the same. Then, why did this self-operating poison city attract Wu-ming? Naturally, it was to let Shitendaji escape. This was also the second reason. The entire place was filled with magic filled with poison. Under normal circumstances, Wu-ming wouldn't be able to detect small magic movements. This way, it was very likely that Shitendaji had already escaped from the city. From Wu-ming's point of view, Shitendaji wasn't a demon who would run away before a fight even started. Not to mention, Ibaraki Duji was still here. And even if Shitendaji left, where could she go? There was only one answer, which was to find Gadatsi and Matthew outside the city. Although Shitendaji wouldn't run away because of fear, he wasn't an idiot either. He wouldn't just sit there and wait for an enemy that he couldn't defeat to find trouble with him. Thus, the wisest choice was to lead the main force away and ambush the enemy's weak point. And what if Shutendaji was the follower sent by the Magic King? Godatsi was the only hope for humanity, at least for now. Then, as long as he eliminated Godatsi, the Magic King wouldn't have any worries. As for why Shutendaji was so sure that only Wu Ming and Karna would come in, it could only be said that this was very likely a part of the plan. Wu Ming guessed that even if Godatsi and Matthew came in, Shutendaji probably had a way to separate them. As expected of the leader of the Great Mountains, the son of the great god Ibaraki, his brain isn't any worse than a human's. Humans didn't have power, so they honed their intelligence. Demons had power, so they abandoned their intelligence. And as the son of the demon god, Shutendaji was very smart. Now, there was someone in front of him who was stalling for time. Shutendaji told me that even if I die today, I'll drag you here. Chapter 512. Ibaraki Duji said domineeringly to Wu Ming. The bone sword in his hand was faintly discernible. Although he couldn't tell if Ibaraki Duji was also immune to the Holy Grail, he was able to walk through the poison as if it didn't exist. But then again, since he lived so close to Shutendaji all year round and wasn't poisoned, he should have some sort of immunity. Who cares? There was one thing that was without a doubt. Ibaraki Duji was sent by Shutendaji to stop Wu Ming. You're quite well-mannered, Ibaraki. Wu Ming greeted Ibaraki Duji. Wah, it's all right. After all, I have something like the Holy Grail. Asterisk cough cough. Asterisk shut up. You and I aren't close enough to greet each other. Ibaraki Duji laughed, but then realized that this was an enemy, so he quickly changed his attitude. No matter how he looked at it, Ibaraki Duji seemed unreliable, but no matter what, he was still the well-known Rashomon ghost, Ibaraki Duji. If that's the case, then Shutendaji must have gone to find Karna, Silent said calmly. Shutendaji, is obviously looking for that human girl. Why would he go find that terrifying son? Asterisk cough cough asterisk of course. It's not that Shutendaji is afraid of that guy. It's just that there's no need to understand. The son was obviously referring to Karna. Like a child, Ibaraki Duji was trying very hard to protect Shutendaji. Is that so? Thank you, Ibaraki Duji. Wu Ming smiled lightly. Now he was sure of Shutendaji's whereabouts. On the other hand, Shutendaji, who heard Wu Ming's thanks, had a strange expression. Forget it, I don't care what you're saying. If it wasn't for that son, how could I have escaped so pathetically? Asterisk cough cough asterisk retreat. And I was even mocked by that sun fox, damn it. Ibaraki Duji didn't realize that he had fallen into Wu Ming's trap and was still throwing a tantrum. Sure enough, anything related to the sun isn't a good thing. You too. Today let me, Ibaraki Dojo, into your light. With a roar, Ibaraki Dojo's left hand stabbed the bone blade into the ground, then raised his right hand and aimed at Wu Ming. Thou must experience the true appearance of us ghosts. His right arm, which had been severed by a treacherous scheme and then regained after losing it, had turned into a freak. Let's go, Hellfire. In an instant, Ibaraki Kido's right hand burned with a strange flame. It turned out that the reason why the servants liked to chant before releasing their noble phantoms was to strengthen their noble phantoms. Of course, there was also a saying that it was more handsome. Asterisk cough asterisk. Just as Wu Ming was about to release his noble artifact to receive the attack, Wu Ming realized that Ibaraki Boy had not fully released his noble artifact. It's not over yet. Ibaraki Kido's left hand moved away from the bone sword and placed it on his right hand. There's more than just this amount of karmic fire. Let the karmic fire of the great mountains burn. In an instant, the flame on Ibaraki Kido's right arm skyrocketed, showing an extreme golden color. Ibaraki Dojo's body was completely engulfed in flames. The only thing that could be seen was that red to the point of gold, and then gold to the point of blackening. This time, Wu Ming did not dare to be careless. It was obvious that his opponent had combined two noble phantoms into one. Moreover, in Wu Ming's perception, Wu Ming clearly noticed that Ibaraki Kido's spiritual base was gradually collapsing. There was no doubt that this was the last noble phantoms of the fused life. Dual noble phantoms coupled with the burning of life. This was the degree of 1 + 1 + 1 greater than 3. The power was much stronger than the previous military noble phantoms, and it was comparable to the Holy Sword. In short, Wuming did not have the confidence to block Ibaraki Kido's double noble phantoms that sacrificed his life. However, Ibaraki Kido's action of burning life touched Wuming's heart. Wuming remembered what Ibaraki Kido had said before. Even if I die today, I will drag you here with me. Those who could become heroic spirits were all heroes without exception. However, the reason why anti-heroes could become heroic spirits and enter the Martyr's Palace was because of their merits. Entering the Martyr's Palace after death was not only a comfort of losing one's freedom, but also a recognition of two great restraints. Wuming was deeply touched by Ibaraki Kido's spirit of sacrificing himself for Shutendaji, which went beyond friendship. Wuming smiled gratifyingly. Then, I'll properly receive your strongest attack, Ibaraki Kido. After saying that, the spear in Wuming's hand dissipated into mana. Wuming opened his arms, and the armor on his body was completely removed from Wuming's body. Wuming's noble phantoms were permanent noble phantoms, but it did not mean that they could not be released. Finally, the removed armor gathered in front of Wuming, constantly changing and combining. A Holy Knight's shield that was as tall as a person, similar to Matthew's shield, floated in front of Wuming. Wuming was dressed in white. He grabbed the handle behind the shield and placed it on the ground. This is my strongest noble phantoms, the proof of my identity as the strongest knight, Vilo Silenced. It's a concept defensive noble phantoms. Ibaraki Kido did not release his noble phantoms. Instead, he quietly listened to Wuming's speech. Wuming did not know if Ibaraki Kido was still alive, as he could no longer sense his aura. Let me see if your feelings for Shutendaji, which surpasses friendship, can break this knight's proof and concept relic. Wuming's words were like an opportunity. After Wuming finished speaking, Ibaraki Boy's final noble artifact was released. The black gold ghostly hand left Ibaraki Boy. After it left, the ghostly hand continued to expand until it became incomparably huge. It was as if Ibaraki Boy had really sacrificed his life. The final cry of the noble artifact sounded incomparably mournful in Wuming's ears. Gift Mind Arthur, Arthur's gift armor. Wuming did not shout with all his might like Ibaraki Dojo. Instead, he was like a holy king, calmly and elegantly reading out the true name of the noble artifact. In an instant, the knight's shield that was as tall as a person shone brightly. There was nothing fancy about it. The knight's shield merely released a light film. The defensive wall formed by the light film started from the shield. The light film first enveloped Wuming, then it began to expand up, down, left, and right. It was like a giant shield of light that was constantly expanding. When the ghostly hand approached Wuming, it had expanded to a height of 100 meters. It was like a monstrous devil's hand trying to grab Wuming. The defensive wall in front of Wuming seemed to be responding to Ibaraki Boy's noble artifact. It expanded to the same width and height as the black gold ghostly hand. In the next second, the giant ghostly hand and the defensive light film came into contact. Rumble. In front of the central hall, Tamamonome was still half kneeling in front of the hall, looking at the nuclear explosion that happened not far away. Because of Wuming's defensive light film, the impact of the explosion did not spread to her. Even the sound of the explosion did not reach her. Before Wuming and Ibaraki Boy released their noble artifacts, Tamamonome had already noticed that something was wrong. The magical waves were too strong. She saw with her own eyes that a giant, ghostly hand that was constantly expanding collided with the defensive light film. She had witnessed this miracle. Sometimes, I'm really jealous of Shutendaji. Tamamonome shook her head as if she was feeling sorry for Ibaraki Boy. Then, she closed her eyes and fell into silence. After all, Wuming's request was not to move. Tamamonome chose to meditate. On the other hand, Karna and Suzaka Misaki were affected by the explosion. Suzaka Misaki was blown to the side. Karna tried his best to stabilize himself and looked at the explosion. Is this Celander's doing? Then, I should end this quickly. Outside the city, Gadotsi stood behind Matthew. She was shocked by the huge explosion in the city. Matthew did not have the time to care about the explosion in the city. Instead, he focused on Shitendaji in front of him. However, Shitendaji was not paying attention to Matthew and Gadotsi. Instead, he was looking at the explosion. She could sense that it was Ibaraki Boy's noble artifact. As expected, Ibaraki, you're an idiot. Chapter 5:13. Although Shitendaji was smiling, his smile wasn't sincere. On the contrary, there was a hint of pain in his smile, but Shitendaji managed to cover it up. She did tell Ibaraki to try his best to stop wooming, but she didn't tell him to risk his life. Shitendaji liked to tease Ibaraki Duji, but that was also a kind of love. Ibaraki knew this, so he tried to delay wooming. For the sake of Shitendaji, Ibaraki sacrificed himself. Although they were both servants, it wasn't easy to meet a close friend. Moreover, servants could be said to have a second life. To be able to meet a close friend in a second life, Shitendaji was very happy. He opened his wine gourd, smiled, and took a sip. Shitendaji no longer paid attention to the explosion. Then, let's continue. I'm looking forward to seeing if the little girl can block my poison. Matthew clenched his teeth with a bitter expression. This time, it's really bad. At this time, a white angel walked out from the side. In the center of the explosion, where Wooming was. Wooming didn't hear any sound, and he didn't see any color other than white. The light membrane calculated the explosion from the collision of the noble phantasm as damage, and the dazzling light from the noble phantasm as damage. Therefore, Wooming's noble phantasm isolated the sound and scene. That was why Wooming could only see white and couldn't hear the explosion. However, one thing was certain. Wooming successfully defended against Ibaraki Duji's noble phantasm. Because Wooming's noble phantasm wasn't destroyed, Wooming didn't die was the best proof. However, this was how it should be. It's such a pity, Ibaraki Duji. The concept noble phantasm under the time paradox can't be destroyed by flames comparable to the sacred sword. This was Wooming's biggest cheat. After leaving Connaught, Wooming accidentally obtained a set of worn-out armor. Because of a magic scroll, he came to Camello, and that set of armor became Wooming's armor as a Knight of the Round Table. After Wooming left, Artoria took it back, and no one knew where it went. Connaught's timeline was the 5th century BC, while Camelot's timeline was the 5th century AD. If that was the case, it wouldn't be a problem for Wooming to bring the armor to the future. However, the problem lay with the scroll. The scroll that Merlin used to summon him was undoubtedly made by Wooming. He could see that, but the scroll appeared thousands of years ago without any trace. If there was no problem with it, Wooming wouldn't believe it. There was no doubt that this was a problem with the scroll. Before he was summoned by Merlin with the scroll, Wooming had discovered the scroll that contained his own blood and was completely made by himself. Assuming that after Wooming was summoned, Merlin used the scroll that was passed down in the past to summon Wooming. Then who made the scroll? Wooming didn't make it, but it was undoubtedly made by Wooming. Wooming had put the scroll in his own space, so the only possibility was the scroll used by Morgan Le Fay. Although the scroll used by Morgan Le Fay was similar to the one made by Wooming, it didn't have Wooming's blood. Assuming that Wooming in Camelot was codenamed Present Wooming, and Wooming in Connaught was Past Wooming, then there was an inference. After the scroll used by Morgan Le Fay in Camelot sucked the present Wooming away, it was also sucked into the space-time tunnel. There might have been a trace of blood on it. After entering the space-time tunnel, it went to the past and was found by the past Wooming. Then, the past Wooming was sucked away. The scroll wasn't taken away by Wooming, but was passed down 1,000 years in the future, where it was used by Merlin, who then sucked the past Wooming over 1,000 years in the future. The past Wooming was sucked away at the same time as Merlin sucked the Wooming over 1,000 years in the future. The past Wuming was sucked away and became the present Wuming. Wuming rubbed his head, feeling a headache coming on. Looks like I'll have to investigate this thoroughly after returning to the origin. It is still possible for the soundless in the Great Root to know such a thing. After all, administrators have to be good at using their authority. Asterisk, 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 asterisk. Wuming only used a little bit of administrator authority. Through the power of the origin and the power of the Holy Grail held by Maeve, he cheated by recreating the armor that came with the time paradox. The strength of this armor was no doubt no weaker than Avalon's. Since it was made by the origin, it must be a masterpiece. While Wuming was thinking, the relic slowly came into contact with him. Since the danger was gone, it was naturally gone. After contact, the shield formed by the armor automatically disintegrated, turning into a new set of armor and attaching itself to Wuming's body. This time, the armor was even holier than before, as if the effect of the true name liberation was still there. Wuming touched the helmet. Due to the big explosion, he knew from the central hall that the city gate was no longer poisonous. Due to the influence of Ibaraki's karmic fire and Wuming's holy light, as well as the storm caused by the explosion, the poison in the soil and the poison in the air were all blown away, burned, and purified. Then, Wuming looked at Ibaraki Dojo. At this moment, Ibaraki Dojo had completely disappeared. Only the place where Ibaraki Dojo used to be was left with a little bit of magic crystals. Regardless of whether the opponent was alive or dead, Ibaraki Dojo would not be able to survive the final blow of sacrificing his life. Shaking his head, Wuming stopped paying attention to this. Then, he ran straight to the city gate. After all, there were no enemies blocking the way. Wuming ran straight to the city gate using the shortest route between 2 points. Near the city gate, Wuming ran into Karna. At this moment, Shizuka Guzan, who was opposite Karna, had disappeared. This meant that Karna had defeated Shizuka Guzan. As expected of Karna, you really won. However, in response to Wuming's compliment, Karna shook his head. My opponent went easy on me. This was a bit strange. However, since Karna said that his opponent had gone easy on him, then he must have gone easy on him. Karna would not lie. Let's not talk about this for now. Tachika is in danger. Shitendaji is going to look for her. Then, Wuming and Karna went to look for Gadatsi. On the way, Karna told Wuming about the battle between him and Shizuka Guzan. Shizuka Guzan's exquisite noble phantasm had indeed hit Karna, but had not seriously injured him. After that, Karna had been fighting Shizuka Guzan in close combat. This was because Karna had discovered that Shizuka Guzan's noble phantasm was based on telekinesis. Therefore, when fighting in close combat, Shizuka Guzan would definitely be wary. In the beginning, because Shizuka Guzan was fighting Karna in close combat, no matter how exquisite her control was, if Karna wanted to play tricks, it was very likely that a few katanas would rebound and hit Shizuka Guzan. This was the disadvantage of being too close to the enemy. Karna had been affected by Wuming and Ibaraki Doji's explosion, so he felt that he should end the battle quickly. Then, after releasing the noble phantasm, Shizuka Guzan symbolically dodged and was hit. There was no doubt that Shizuka Guzan had gone easy on him. Although he did not know why Shizuka Guzan had gone easy on him, the outcome was good. Shitendaji was the only one missing. Then, when Wuming and Karna found Gadatsi and Matthew, they found that Nightingale had appeared beside them at some point. Shitendaji, on the other hand, was drinking wine with a smile on his face. However, no matter how one looked at him, Shitendaji looked quite depressed. Chapter 514. We saw that Gadatsi was fine. Wuming was relieved. It was obvious that Shitendaji didn't attack Gadatsi because of Nightingale, who appeared out of nowhere. I failed completely this time. I don't have a good relationship with this lady. Shitendaji seemed to have given up and said to Wuming. Although Wuming didn't understand Nightingale's ability, seeing that she was a nurse, he guessed that her noble phantasm should be something like healing or purification. And from Shitendaji's current expression, it could be seen that Nightingale's ability completely restrained her. That's true. Shitendaji. Wuming was no longer anxious because there were only 2 servants left in the Nippon faction, and Tamamonome seemed to be on Wuming's side. In fact, Wuming's guess was correct. When Shitendaji used poison to attack Gadatsi and Matthew, Nightingale calmly walked out of the forest and released her noble phantasm. As a result, Shitendaji's poison was completely purified. At this moment, the wine that Shitendaji drank was poison-free. I have to say, Shitendaji is really unlucky when it comes to luck. Even Gadatsi couldn't help but ridicule. According to Gadatsi's judgment, Shitendaji spent a lot of effort to get out of Denver and attack her, the last master. But in the end, at the final moment, a servant that completely countered Shitendaji appeared out of nowhere. Just how unlucky was Seiji to meet such a servant? After all, Nightingale left in the middle of the night chasing after Achilles, who knew that he would meet her here. Well, actually, I've always been unlucky. Looking at the confident Shitendaji, Wuming subconsciously felt that something was wrong. Wuming knew just how dangerous Shitendaji was, so he chose to immediately attack Shitendaji. The holy spear pierced towards Shitendaji, but Shitendaji didn't try to defend or dodge. I remember that you were looking for the Holy Grail. Unfortunately, the Holy Grail is no longer in my hands. The holy spear stopped right before Shitendaji's neck. This is the second time we've met, Shitendaji, although I'm not sure if you still remember me. Although Wuming spoke to Shitendaji, he still kept the holy spear at Shitendaji's neck. Of course I remember. I clearly remember that you chopped off my head, Shitendaji said in a satisfied tone, not at all like he was being held captive. No matter if it's Ibaraki, Temumeneme, or even Suzuka Guzan, the golden light on their bodies, as well as this continuous poison, were all created by me through the Holy Grail. Shitendaji said everything without hesitation. However, I didn't bring the Holy Grail with me. Shitendaji smiled. Then, if Shitendaji didn't bring the Holy Grail with him, where did he put it? The central hall had been infiltrated by his mental power, but there was no trace of the Holy Grail. Suzuka Guzan and Ibaraki Doji had already left. Could it be Tamamonome? Wuming fell into deep thought. Wuming felt that he had overlooked something. Suddenly, Wuming's pupils shrank as he thought of something. This city was undoubtedly a noble artifact, and it was one that had been blessed by the Holy Grail. Suzuka Guzan didn't have such a legend. Although Ibaraki Doji and Shitendaji had said that they had built a city in the mountains, this city wasn't suitable for ghosts. As for Tamamonome, she didn't have any legends of a city. In that case, there must be a hidden follower, and this city must belong to that follower. Shitendaji seemed to have seen through Wuming's thoughts and smiled. That's right, I gave the Holy Grail to the owner of this city. After all, I didn't plan to go back, Shitendaji smiled. However, this smile was quite familiar to Wuming. It was the same smile that Shitendaji had before he left in the Winterwood City. Pucci, Wuming stabbed his spear into Shitendaji's neck, but Shitendaji smiled. She was disappearing bit by bit. Although Shitendaji couldn't speak because Wuming had pierced his throat, Wuming was able to read Shitendaji's words through the shape of his mouth. I'll be waiting for you in Himeji City. Then, Shitendaji turned into magic and dissipated. Rumble, suddenly, the earth began to shake violently. Matthew supported Gadatsi, who almost fell. Karna and Nightingale looked behind Wuming. Wuming turned around and looked at the huge Denver City, or Himeji City. In the second half of Himeji City, a huge pillar rose from the ground. Countless eyes were inlaid on this huge pillar of flesh, turning and blinking from time to time. It was very terrifying. That's a demon god pillar. Gadatsi cried out in surprise. After all, Gadatsi had already experienced 4 singularities and encountered many demon god pillars, so she naturally recognized it. Nightingale and Karna were also shocked. After all, the aura emitted by the huge pillar of flesh in the distance was a bit terrifying. While everyone was surprised, Wuming shook his head helplessly. I was tricked by Shitendaji again. Shitendaji set up Poison City and sent Ibaraki Doji Lulu, Guzan, and Tamamonome to intercept Wuming. It seemed that they were going to attack Gadatsi, and Wuming would quickly return to protect Gadatsi. But in fact, they were misled. With this plan, Wuming and others were transferred away, giving the servant at the back of Himeji City an opportunity to summon the demon god pillar. However, according to Shitendaji's words, "I'll be waiting for you in Himeji City." It was very likely that this demon god pillar was controlled by Shitendaji. This also proved why it took so long to summon the demon god pillar, because it needed Shitendaji's consciousness to be stored in this huge pillar of flesh. Sure enough, it confirmed Wuming's thoughts once again. Even if Shitendaji left, he must have left me a lot of trouble. Karna, you stay with Matthew and Nightingale to protect Tachika. I'll go meet that guy, Wuming said to Karna. Karna didn't speak, just nodded, and then stood beside Gadatsi. Although Gadatsi always had Matthew by her side, she couldn't guarantee that she could completely protect some powerful servants. Just like Shitendaji, just now, Matthew found it a little difficult to defend against the pervasive poisonous gas. Also because of guilt, Matthew didn't speak, but obediently stayed by Gadatsi's side. Gadatsi, on the other hand, seemed to be in a bad mood. That's the demon god pillar. How can I let you go alone? Gadatsi mercilessly rejected Wuming's proposal. Although Matthew didn't speak, the worry in his eyes was still seen by Wuming. Wuming stared blankly, then laughed. "Don't worry, didn't I say? I'm not an ordinary servant." Wuming smiled and comforted the two. But Gadatsi still didn't agree and wanted to refute. "Trust me, you and Matthew staying here will make me feel more at ease." Wuming looked at Gadatsi and Matthew firmly. It wasn't that the two of them were burdens. Well, in fact, it was a little bit. Cough, cough. The most important thing was that Wuming believed that the demon god pillar was controlled by Shitendaji. Facing a different demon god pillar, Wuming really didn't feel at ease letting Gadatsi and Matthew go with him. And with Wuming's strength, it wouldn't be too difficult to deal with the demon god pillar with some effort. It was also because of this that Karna agreed to stay and let Wuming go to the battlefield alone. Although the two of them seemed to be tied in the previous battle, Karna knew that he couldn't beat Wuming, who cheated. Since that was the case, he had enough strength on the battlefield, so he was responsible for protecting Gadatsi. In the end, Gadatsi and Matthew nodded and chose to believe in Wuming. Wuming realized that one of them was missing. Where did Nightingale go? Gadatsi and Matthew also realized that Nightingale was missing. At this time, Karna, who was loyally acting as a weapon, spoke. "As for the nurse, she ran toward the demon god pillar while you were talking." As expected of the obedient Karna. If you don't ask, he won't say. Wuming rubbed his forehead with a slight headache. Chapter 5:15. At the back of Ji-Lu City, the huge, tentacle-like demon god pillars were wriggling about. The eyes on the demon god pillars would turn from time to time, blinking, looking particularly terrifying. A strange sound came from the demon god pillar. It was a sound that humans and even servants could not make. This was the unique cry of the demon god pillars. Along with the demon god pillar's cry, dense purple fog was emitted from the demon god pillar's eyes. The purple mist didn't move fast, but it was very powerful. The first half of the Holy Grail enhanced version of Ji-Lu City was basically destroyed by Wuming and Ibaraki's noble artifacts. However, the second half of Ji-Lu City was still intact because of Wuming's noble artifacts. When the purple fog emitted by the demon god pillars came in contact with the palaces and pavilions of Ji-Lu City, the moment it came in contact with them, those palaces and pavilions were immediately corroded. It was like a deadly poison. Although the purple fog moved slowly because it didn't encounter any resistance, gradually, the buildings in the back half of Ji-Lu City, with the demon god pillars as the center, melted away. Taking a closer look, nearly half of the buildings in the back half of Ji-Lu City had been corroded and melted away. The melted buildings were like ordinary water that blended into the ground. Although the ground wasn't decayed, the gradual blackening of the ground proved that it didn't escape the corrosion of the poison. Nightingale pledge. I will eradicate all poisons and all harmful things. In an instant, along with the release of the true name of this precious artifact, a part of the purple mist in front of the demon god pillar disappeared, including the ground that had already turned black. The ground returned to its original color. Not only that, but there were also signs of sprouting on the ground that was covered by the relic. Oh, it's your nurse again? We really don't get along well. At this moment, Shatindaji's voice came from the demon god pillar. However, the demon god pillar's voice wasn't completely Shatindaji's. There was a strange sound mixed in as well, which was probably the demon god pillar's own voice. Without a doubt, Wuming's guess was correct. However, Nightingale did not answer demon god Shooting's question. Instead, she tried her best to unleash her noble artifact. Nightingale's noble phantasm. I will eradicate all poisons, all harmful things, forbidden phantasm, was an area with Nightingale as the center. It could nullify all poisons and attacks. This noble phantasm was a concept noble phantasm. It was a combination of the spiritual sublimation of Nightingale, who galloped on the battlefield and faced death, coupled with various anecdotes of her, as well as the concept of angel in white who helped the sick and wounded, which was established in modern times. It was proven that a concept relic had an advantage over a physical relic. It was a grade C plus anti-army relic. I will eradicate all poisonous and harmful creatures. The territory that it displayed was like an invincible holy territory. There was no poison or harm at all. The surrounding purple fog surged violently into this area, intending to corrode it. However, no matter how much of it there was, it was useless. The poison that entered was completely eliminated by this precious artifact. As this noble phantasm was centered around Nightingale, while Nightingale was unleashing her noble phantasm, she was constantly moving towards demon god Shutting. However, as the range of the noble phantasm was not very large, the moving Nightingale had already seen such a scene. Amidst a large expanse of purple mist, a circle without any purple mist was moving towards the most important sky pillar. It gave off a feeling of a mantis trying to stop a chariot and overestimating its own capabilities. However, that was the truth. Looking at Nightingale, who was moving towards him with all her might, demon god Shutting laughed. If it was the previous me, you would indeed be my nemesis. However, this is a demon god pillar, Miss Nurse. The moment demon god Shutting finished speaking, an even thicker dark purple fog emerged from behind the demon god pillar. Just by looking at it, Nightingale, who was a berserker, could feel the danger from it. The dark purple fog contained a large amount of magic and rushed towards Nightingale's noble phantasm domain at an extremely fast speed. No matter what it was, there was a limit to it. Wuming's almost infinite magic, Avalon, which was rumored to be able to block even a world-defying noble phantasm, and Nightingale's noble phantasm domain were the same. The reason why Wuming's magic was said to be infinite was because of his overly large base, super recovery speed, and the fact that he had no place to use these 3 points. The reason why Avalon could block the world-defying noble phantasm was because Avalon had not encountered a stronger attack. At the very least, Wuming believed that if he used the Great Source to launch an attack, Avalon would not be able to block it. Since that was the case, Nightingale's noble phantasm domain also had its limits. It seemed like Nightingale's noble phantasm could completely restrain Shutting Doji's poison. However, if it encountered a large amount of poison that could not be eliminated in time, or if it was not poison but a powerful magic attack, Nightingale's noble phantasm domain might not be able to eliminate it completely. Demon god Shutting had such a plan. He did not continue to release poison. Instead, he released the demon god pillar's demon fog skill. The powerful demon fog surged towards Nightingale's domain. As expected, although Nightingale's noble phantasm had eliminated part of the mana fog, most of it remained and continued to fly toward Nightingale within the noble phantasm. Nightingale did not say a word, allowing the dark purple fog to gradually approach her. She knew that she could not resist it. Mystery would be ineffective in front of a higher level of mystery. This was probably the theory behind it. Nightingale was considered a modern person. In terms of mystery, she was much weaker than the demon god Pillar. Moreover, Nightingale's noble phantasm was only a grade C noble phantasm. It was impossible for it to eliminate any damage. In this case, Nightingale, who did not have any other powerful abilities, might be defeated this time due to Berserker's impulsiveness. However, she did not regret it. If she wanted Berserker to regret it, she might have to wait until her next life. Of course, if Nightingale was alone, she would definitely be defeated here. However, there was no doubt that Nightingale was not alone. Whoosh! Accompanied by the sound of chains, Nightingale was tied up by a silver-white chain and was pulled out of the attack range of the dark purple fog. Oh, you're not satisfied with the speed? Demon God Shutong spoke again. After all, no matter if it's Shitendaji or the demon god Pillar, they're all my enemies. Wuming replied, Demon God Shutong calmly, as he kept the pseudo-heavenly lock back into the golden ripple. As Nightingale's noble phantasm was still activated, although the poisonous fog had spread over, it did not corrode Wuming. Then play with me for a while. My new enemy. Looking at the dark purple fog that was controlled by demon god Shutong, Wuming began to recall what Tamamonome had said. Chapter 516. Wuming was on his way to demon god Shutong. When Wuming passed by the central great hall, he discovered that Tamamonome was still sitting on the platform in front of the hall, not moving at all. And at this moment, the omnipresent poison gas was emitted from the central great hall, about to reach Tamamonome. Even people who didn't know what the mist was would feel danger, let alone Wuming who knew what the purple mist was. Wuming extended his hand, and golden ripples appeared. The pseudo-heaven lock appeared from the ripples, and in an instant, the pseudo-heaven lock wrapped around Tamamonome. Immediately afterwards, Wuming waved his hand, and the chains pulled Tamamonome over. Tamamonome didn't resist, and let Wuming pull her over with the chains. Catching Tamamonome and retrieving the chains, Wuming asked subconsciously, Why are you still here? The demon god Pillar's attack is already here. The reason why Wuming asked this was because even if Tamamonome had the immunity granted by the Holy Grail, even if she could defend against the demon god Pillar's poison, the demon god Pillar still had other attacks. Since the poison gas could reach here, the demon god Pillar's other attacks would naturally be able to as well. However, in response to Wuming's question, Tamamonome smiled sweetly. Didn't you tell me to stay here? This is your promise. Tamamonome winked at Wuming like a mischievous child. With Tamamonome's words, Wuming felt rather awkward. Actually, Wuming didn't care about his words at all. Seeing that Tamamonome had told him the truth, Wuming only warned Tamamonome not to play any tricks behind his back. Wuming only used the words, stay here and don't go anywhere, to warn her. Wuming didn't think that Tamamonome wouldn't do anything in the face of danger. Who would have thought that Tamamonome would be so serious? Take it that I didn't say it well. However, remember this. You can go back on an unimportant agreement like this when your life is in danger. Wuming said very seriously. But that was my first promise with you. I don't want to break it just like that. However, since you personally came to help me break the promise, then I'll let it go this time. Tamamonome smiled, acknowledging Wuming's words. Also, Lord Sarandar, how much longer are you planning to hug me? Tamamonome smiled innocently. Wuming's expression turned awkward, and he quickly put down Tamamonome. After using the pseudo-heaven lock to pull Tamamonome over, Wuming withdrew the heaven lock. Wuming then hugged Tamamonome like hugging a cat. Speaking of which, hugging Tamamonome was no different from hugging a cat. Cough, cough. Back to the main topic. Since you've kept your promise, I'll temporarily treat you as my partner. Keep walking towards the city gate and meet up with Chaldea's master. Although Wuming said that he would treat Tamamonome as his partner purely because of the promise, Wuming did not completely believe him. Who would completely believe a strange woman who was originally an enemy, but suddenly said that she wanted to marry you when she saw you? Seeing that Tamamonome did not try anything funny, Wuming decided to temporarily let her join the party. Moreover, Even if Tamamo betrayed him, it would be fine. Karnak was there, so he was not afraid of Tamamo betraying him. Tamamo nodded regretfully, as if she was unhappy that she did not become his wife. However, Tamamo seemed to have thought of something, and she nodded honestly, and then asked, "What about you, Lord Sarandar? If I'm not wrong, you're going to destroy the demon god pillars, right?" Wuming naturally nodded and admitted it. There was nothing to hide. Could it be that Wuming came here specifically to save Tamamo? Wuming and Tamamonome's relationship was not that good. Regarding this, I have something to say. Tamamonome bowed to Wuming, as if she was really putting herself in the position of a subject. Wuming nodded. Since there was information, he naturally had to listen to it. After Wuming nodded, Tamamonome spoke. "Actually, the Holy Grail was placed with Judge Ji, but I feel that this matter has nothing to do with her. It was completely planned by Shitendaji. You are indeed the concubine of justice." Wuming nodded. Previously, when Shitendaji had mouthed to Wuming to wait for you in Jiro City, Wuming had more or less guessed it. After all, Jiro City was the residence of Judge Ji, the monster of the city. It wasn't strange for it to become a noble artifact. Actually, when your noble artifact landed in this city, even though Judge Heim borrowed the power of the Holy Grail, in order to resist your somewhat cheating noble artifact, Judge Heim herself probably didn't have a good time waiting for me. Shitendaji didn't take back the Holy Grail and instead left it with Judge Heim. Hearing this, Wuming came to a realization. This made sense. Even if Wuming's abnormal cheating noble artifact was blocked by Jiro City, it shouldn't have left Jiro City in ruins. It shouldn't have left anything behind and directly exploded into ashes. If he borrowed the power of the Holy Grail, then it made sense. "Listen to your nonsense. Have you never seen Judge Ji?" Wuming asked. After all, Tamamonome's words showed that she didn't know the truth. "That's right, Sarandar-sama. Shitendaji asked me to stand guard here after Punbuji blocked your noble artifact. I will try my best to delay you with the formation of the formation." Suzuka Guzan and Ibaraki Doji were also sent out. Then, Wuming knew what happened after that. Karna stalled Suzuka Guzan. Wuming came here and was told the reason by Tamamonome, and when he returned, he was stopped by Ibaraki. They fought, and Ibaraki self-destructed. In the end, Shitendaji died, but the demon god pillar was summoned. Actually, I wanted to visit Judge Ji after you left and retrieve the Holy Grail for you. But because of the agreement between you and me, I didn't do so. Wuming raised his eyebrows. "So you're blaming me?" "Okay, it seems like you're blaming me." Asterisk cough cough asterisk Wuming shook his head and said, "I don't think that even if you take the Holy Grail away, the demon god pillar can't be summoned." Wuming believed that Shitendaji's death was the trigger for the demon god pillar to be summoned. It was very likely that Shitendaji had done something to the Holy Grail from the beginning, using his own life as the trigger. Once Shitendaji left, the Holy Grail would automatically activate and summon the demon god pillar with Shitendaji's consciousness. Moreover, it's hard to say if you could defeat Judge Ji. Actually, when Wuming was hugging Tamamonome, Wuming had already noticed that Tamamonome didn't have much fighting strength. Compared to the white-faced, golden-haired, nine-tailed fox Tamamonome, who was recorded as one of the 3 demons, the current Tamamonome was just a support fox. Although that's the case, I don't think that Judge Ji will fight back. Tamamonome smiled. This made Wuming puzzled. Could it be that these two were good friends? Chapter 517. Facing Wuming's doubts, Tamamonome covered her mouth with her sleeve and smiled. "That's what your concubine thinks. That's why your concubine said that the summoning of the demon god pillar had nothing to do with Judge Heim. Damn, she's even keeping me in suspense." Wuming shook his head helplessly. "Since there's nothing else, I'll take my leave. Nightingale probably can't hold on any longer." With that, Wuming prepared to leave. "Wuming-sama." Tamamonome suddenly opened her mouth and called Wuming by his real name. Wuming turned his head and stared at Tamamonome. Facing Wuming's stare, Tamamonome smiled apologetically and said, "You're an existence blessed by Amaterasu Amikami's incarnation. Make good use of that power." With that, Wuming left. After all, if he delayed any longer, Nightingale really wouldn't be able to hold on. Following that, Wuming recalled the scene from before. Wuming used the pseudo-heaven lock to pull Nightingale back. Blessing from the sun god, Wuming recalled Tamamonome's words and thought of the sun rain. By the way, Shitendaji, have you ever felt the despair brought by the sun? With that, Wuming closed his eyes and began to feel the mysterious power that entered his body without him noticing. "Oh, I didn't even feel despair from Minamoto no Reiko. Can you make me feel despair?" Demon god Shutendaji let out a strange sound. Following that, he began to make the first move. The countless eyes on the demon god pillar spun faster and faster, gathering magical power. Following that, each eye released a heat ray comparable to a holy sword. The heat rays gathered together and formed a huge pillar of light with a diameter of 100 meters, attacking Wuming and Nightingale. Wuming opened his eyes and waved his hand. "Gate!" Nightingale chanted a simple incantation, and a purple ripple appeared beneath her feet. Nightingale fell down in an instant. After Wuming heard a scream, Nightingale was completely engulfed by the purple ripples. Arthur's gift armor. After releasing the concept relic once again, the armor on Wuming's body detached and formed shield. The shield formed a light film and welcomed the heat rays of the demon god, shutting shot out. ZZ, the expected explosion did not happen. The shield's light membrane disintegrated all the heat rays from the demon god, wine swallowing, turning them into pure magic power that spread out in all directions with a sizzling sound. Gate! Chanting the incantation again, Wuming's figure behind the shield disappeared, leaving only a purple ripple. Suddenly, the demon god pillar made an incomprehensible sound. It was a scream that belonged to the demon god pillar. Behind the demon god pillar, Wuming was holding his holy spear. The front half of the holy spear had already pierced one of the eyes behind the demon god pillar. Although there were eyes behind the demon god pillar, because Wuming appeared too quickly, the demon god pillar did not react at all. As for how Wuming came over, the purple ripple that was slowly closing behind Wuming became a powerful explanation. Wuming could use the teleportation portal to any place he had been to and any place he could see. Wuming pulled the holy spear out of the demon god pillar's eye, jumped back, and left the demon god pillar's body. The moment he left, a large amount of dark purple fog appeared from the eyes of the surrounding demon god pillars. Without a doubt, if Wuming did not dodge, he would have been enveloped by the dark purple fog. Without the protection of his armor, Wuming did not dare be careless. Even if the dark purple fog did not seem like poisonous fog, who knew whether it would dissolve in an instant? Because of the damage, the demon god pillar stopped releasing heat rays. And because of this, Wuming's noble artifact also stopped. However, Wuming did not let the noble artifact recover his armor. Compared to the permanent noble artifact's armor form, the shield form after True Name Liberation was much more useful. However, it was unable to move in time. The demon god, Jiotun, naturally noticed that the shield did not arrive at Wuming's side in time. Immediately, the eyes behind the demon god pillar began to revolve violently. Along with the condensation of magic, heat rays were also released. The target was naturally Wuming, who was behind the demon god pillar. Gate! The shield that appeared from the purple ripple blocked the demon god pillar's attack. Although the shield itself was unable to come over in time, Wuming had a way to make the shield come over. The teleportation gate that Wuming used to teleport behind the demon god pillar was not closed. Wuming expanded it and opened another teleportation gate in front of him. Naturally, the shield could come over. Next, Wuming used the teleportation gate to launch a sneak attack on the demon god pillar. The demon god pillar attacked Wuming, while Wuming used the teleportation gate to block the damage. Although it seemed like Wuming had the advantage, that was not the case. Because Wuming had the concept noble artifact, the demon god pillar was unable to hurt Wuming. However, Wu Ming's attacks were also ineffective against the demon god pillar. Wu Ming stabbed in different places with his spear. However, after stabbing, the demon god pillar's powerful body would heal his injuries. One was the Dragon of Origin's spiritual base, while the other was the demon god pillar controlled by Shitendaji. Both of them were life forms with a high degree of mystery. This created a very awkward situation. Wu Ming could not hurt the demon god Shitendaji, while the demon god Shitendaji could not hurt Wu Ming. Ah, your tortoiseshell is really tough. Shitendaji was not upset at all. Your recovery ability is not bad either, demon god Shitendaji. Wu Ming replied. Since that's the case, I won't play with you anymore. After demon god Shitendaji finished speaking, the huge demon god pillar began to move towards Gadatsi. She was not prepared to fight this unsolvable battle with Wu Ming. She was prepared to get rid of the most important person. Wu Ming would definitely not allow that. Once again, he used the teleportation gate to arrive at one of the demon god pillar's eyes and stabbed with the holy spear. The demon god pillar was already used to having its eyes pierced, and because Shitendaji was not prepared to pay attention to Wu Ming, the demon god pillar did not move at all. However, Wu Ming smiled. Found it. Wu Ming said before that he wanted Shitendaji to experience the despair brought by the sun and close his eyes to feel the blessing of the sun rain. Naturally, he would not play such a boring game with demon god Shitendaji. The reason why Wu Ming kept stabbing the demon god pillar was actually to find the holy grail inside the demon god pillar. Wu Ming did not think that the summoned demon god pillar would put the holy grail aside and not devour it. It could be said that without the holy grail, the demon god pillar's strength would definitely decrease. However, Wu Ming did not want to take out or destroy the holy grail. At this moment, a large amount of black fog suddenly enveloped Wu Ming. This was a magic corrosive fog that was even purer than the dark purple fog from before. I already knew that you were looking for the Holy Grail. You should thank me. I let you find it on purpose. Shitendaji's mocking voice could be heard. After all, Shitendaji was not an idiot. He guessed what Wu Ming was thinking, so he set up this trap to make Wu Ming fall into it. Of course, I knew that this was a trap. After all, if it was you, it would be impossible for me to find the Holy Grail. So I took the initiative to jump into this trap. Wu Ming's voice came from the black fog, and it was a rather spirited voice. It did not sound like it was being corroded at all. After all, only this way can I release my authority. Chapter 5:18. Although Wu Ming had cheated, he did not have any trump cards like the Savior Sword or the 12 clones because of Celander's spiritual base. Wu Ming had only created an ordinary spiritual base in a root of Genesis and sent it to this singularity. Celander's identity was created by Maeve using the Holy Grail, so Wu Ming did not choose to interfere. After all, being invited in and barging in were two different concepts. Moreover, even without the Savior Sword and the 12 clones, Wu Ming was not weak. However, although he wasn't weak, he couldn't really injure Demon God Shudong without using a noble artifact. If he wanted to cripple him, he would have to use a super energy-storing noble artifact again. However, Wu Ming did not plan to use a relic in the first place. As he had a concept relic to defend himself, the Demon God Pillar's attack could not hurt Wu Ming. It was a sad story. Therefore, Shitenji could only use the Holy Grail to lure Wu Ming out from behind the tortoise shell. Wu Ming also needed to come into contact with the Holy Grail, so Shitenji's actions helped Wu Ming. Previously, Wu Ming had received the sun rain from Tamamonome and received the sun god's blessing passively. After Wu Ming found out that the blessing was from the sun god, he wanted to use it to blow up the demon god Shitenji. How would he blow it up? Of course, he would use his authority to transform into the sun. With the sun god's blessing, Wu Ming did not need to change his class. He could directly use the Holy Grail to connect with the root of Genesis and use the sun god Shitenji. Of course, due to various factors, this move was only a one-time use. After it was used, it would be gone. However, based on the current situation, Wu Ming felt that it was worth it. If the demon god Shitenji was allowed to wreak havoc in the American continent, the entire continent would probably turn into a land of poison in a few days. This proved the saying once again. Even if he left, Shitendaji would still cause trouble for Wuming. That was why Wuming decided to directly use the sun god's blessing upon seeing Shitendaji turn into a demon god pillar and connect to the great origins usage of the Holy Grail. This was also why Wuming wasn't the slightest bit nervous even after falling into Shooting's trap, because the sun's flames would burn everything. For the sake of victory, quickly come before me. Undying sun, please bestow upon me a shining steed. Horses with enough intelligence. Bring me the light wheel that symbolizes your master. After Wuming finished chanting, the fog surrounding Wuming began to glow. Boom! A ball of golden flames broke out from the fog with an explosion, starting to burn on the demon god pillar. The demon god pillar once again let out an incomprehensible sound of pain. General, demon god Wine-Tun. Immediately afterwards, the golden flames instantly covered the entire demon god pillar. A strange scene appeared in G-Road City. The giant pillar burning with golden flames kept twisting as if trying to get rid of these deadly flames, but it couldn't get rid of them. A deep sense of powerlessness came from this flame pillar. Amaterasu, on the hillside outside G-Road City, Tamamonome looked at this scene and said softly, "Huh, Castor, what did you say?" Gadatsi, who was standing beside Tamamonome, asked doubtfully. "Nothing, Master-sama." Tamamonome smiled and covered it up. Gadatsi didn't ask again, but focused on the giant flame pillar. Just now, the burning of the demon god pillar made Gadatsi shout. She was very excited, and now she calmed down. Nightingale, who was teleported by Wuming to Gadatsi's side, saw that the virus was about to be finished and relaxed a lot. "Amaterasu," Karna said faintly. He heard Tamamonome's words. Matthew and Karna, two people, one on the left and one on the right, stood beside Gadatsi and Tamamonome. The former was guarding his senior, and the latter, it seemed that because of the sun attribute, Karna had a good impression of Tamamonome. At least, he could talk to her and wouldn't ignore her. Of course, Tamamonome was also very interested in this same kind. As long as it was related to the sun, it was a good thing. Immediately afterwards, the golden flames slowly disappeared, and the huge demon god pillar disappeared along with it. There is no doubt that the demon god pillar disappeared. With Wuming's power, the sun incarnation disappeared, just like Lev in the Winterwood City. It's just that the demon god pillar Florence died, and there was still Lev left, but demon god Wine-Tun died. There was nothing left. No, it should be the only thing left. Wuming looked at the original position of the demon god pillar and thought with a strange expression. At this moment, a girl who was dressed like a Japanese princess was lying on the demon god pillar's position. Her eyes were spinning in a spiral shape. There was no doubt that this girl was unconscious, and it wasn't light. Wuming could faintly hear the unconscious girl mumbling something subconsciously. No, no more torture, no more torture. Wuming smiled, not knowing what to do. Looking at this princess girl who was no longer being tortured, she was probably talking about Tamamonome's punishment princess. It seemed that Tamamonome had been brought into the demon god pillar when it appeared. Otherwise, Wuming didn't think that Tamamonome would have been able to survive until now in the demon god pillar's attack range. I think I understand why Tamamonome said that Tamamonome wouldn't be the one who summoned the demon god pillar. Looking at Tamamonome's appearance, she had been unconscious for a long time. She had probably fainted after blocking Wuming's treasured artifact. Shitendaji, placing the Holy Grail in front of the unconscious Tamamonome, made sense. Shaking his head, Wuming stopped paying attention to Tamamonome and looked at his hand. Wuming held the golden Holy Grail with one hand. Sensing the magic on it, Wuming smiled. He had finally recovered a Holy Grail. Not long after, Gadatsi's group arrived. As if it was a coincidence, when Gadatsi's group arrived, Tamamonome turned into magic and left. After blocking Wuming's treasured artifact, being sucked into the demon god pillar, and being injured by Wu Ming's sun incarnation, it was already a miracle that she was able to last until Gadatsi's group arrived and didn't leave with the demon god pillar. Placing the Holy Grail in his golden ripples, Wu Ming looked at Gadatsi and sighed. Finally, the first Holy Grail has been collected. Why do I feel so tired for some reason? Wu Ming thought. Chapter 519. Wu Ming did not choose to let Chaldea retrieve the Holy Grail. Not to mention that Chaldea had not been contacted yet. Moreover, even if Wu Ming was contacted, he would not easily hand over the Holy Grail that he had just obtained to Chaldea's group. It was not that Wu Ming was greedy, but because Wu Ming was worried that the Holy Grail newly created by the Magic King would have some kind of trap. Wu Ming did not think that the Magic King's game would be so simple with only a few forces. However, it seemed that for the current Gadatsi and others, the 5 forces were indeed difficult. However, to Wu Ming, the current chaotic battle between the 5 forces did not pose much of a threat. Although he did not know why the Magic King did not appear in person, even so, he could not do anything to Wu Ming. After all, it was not his main body. However, the Magic King, who did not appear, gave Wu Ming a feeling that there was something more important that he could not come. However, when they were in the underground of London, the Magic King said to Gadatsi and others that as long as they did not open all 7 singularities, they would not be a threat to him at all. Just like how ordinary people would not care whether ants could hurt them, whether it was 1 ant or 7 ants, it was all the same. According to the Magic King, only when all 7 singularities were saved would he take the initiative to kill Gadatsi and others. During this time, Wu Ming did not think that the Magic King would sit in front of the TV and eat popcorn while watching Gadatsi and others take risks. Then there was no doubt that the Magic King also had something to do. However, because of Wu Ming's intervention, Wu Ming was not sure whether the Magic King really did not eat popcorn and sit in front of the TV to watch what happened at this singularity. In any case, these new Holy Grails did not make Wu Ming feel at ease. So Wu Ming and Gadatsi agreed that the Holy Grails that they obtained later would be temporarily guarded by him. Wu Ming and others walked out of Jiro City and began to move towards Riverton in the north. Jiro City did not seem to be a noble phantasm that would disappear with the servants. The Japanese forces were destroyed, and the Holy Grail was recovered by Wu Ming, but Jiro City was still there. It was still the same ruins, or even worse, razed to the ground. Let's not talk about the collision between Wu Ming and Ibaraki Boy's noble artifacts. The demon god pillar's poisonous fog and all kinds of destruction were enough to destroy Jiwei City, which had lost its defenses due to Ji's coma and overload. Wu Ming guessed that Shitendaji. Because of this, he used the Holy Grail to summon the summoned monsters to leave the summoned monsters, leaving only the servants. Wu Ming Doji. Gadatsi, Matthew, and Nightingale was to be in the middle. In the middle was to the rears. In this way, Wu Ming Doji's group did not move fast, and it could even be said that they were moving slowly. After all, they had just won a battle, and there was no need to be too anxious, so Wu Ming Doji's group of 6 walked slowly. In fact, it was also to take care of Gadatsi. After all, it was rare for them to come into contact with the current crisis, so there was no need to carry Gadatsi as if they were transporting goods. However, they could not be too careless as the current lineup of 6 people could be seen. Wu Ming Doji and Karna were in front and behind, while Matthew and Nightingale were guarding Gadatsi in the middle. As for Tamamo Mei, who had been following behind Wu Ming, she followed by herself. Besides, it would not affect them much, so Wu Ming acquiesced. However, it seemed that it really did affect them. Along the way, Gadatsi Doji and Matthew kept looking at Wu Ming strangely, as if they were shy, as if they were praising him, as if they were gratified. In short, it was that kind of strange look that Wu Ming could not put his finger on. The more Wu Ming Doji thought about it, the more he felt that something was wrong, so he asked Tamamo Mei, "Did you say something strange when you came here and met up with Tachika Doji and the others?" "Lord Celander, you're overthinking it. I merely politely introduced myself as your fiancé to you, Master." Tamamo May smiled elegantly at Wu Ming. Wu Ming Doji finally understood why Gadatsi Doji and Matthew Doji were looking at him in such a way. But I didn't say that I wanted you to be my fiancé. Forget it, forget it. Let's leave it at that for now. Seeing that it was because Tamamo May had fought the demon god Shutong, Wu Ming Doji decided to take a loss and leave their relationship at that for the time being. Hello. Speaking of which, why is Ms. Nightingale here? Wu Ming asked Gadatsi and the others behind him. Although Wu Ming's team of 6 had arranged themselves in a strict manner, Wu Ming, who was leading the way, and Karna, who was bringing up the rear, were only a few meters away from Gadatsi. Therefore, Wu Ming didn't need to raise his voice or wait until he was close enough. He could just ask directly. Oh, you're talking about this problem. Actually, it's like this. Gadatsi smiled and explained to Wu Ming. After Wu Ming heard this, he began to have some doubts about luck. That night, Wu Ming instigated Nightingale to perform an amputation operation on Achilles. Achilles was already fed up with the berserker, so he ran away. Naturally, Nightingale let go of this excellent amputation material and chased after him. The two chased each other on the land southeast of the Missouri River that was not under the influence of Rome and Greece. In this way, Nightingale chased after Achilles for a few days, but in the end, Achilles was more skillful and escaped Nightingale's pursuit. After all, he was a cavalry. Nightingale, on the other hand, could not find her target, so she began to save others along the way. For some reason, ordinary natives, soldiers of the Revolutionary Army, and so on were still wandering. Humans were not to be underestimated. Even in an era where the 5 forces were divided, humans could survive on their own. The location of Denver was not so much located in the Rocky Mountains, but more accurately, it was located at the foot of the Rocky Mountains. In other words, the terrain was not high. Coincidentally, Nightingale's original location was south of Riverton and north of Denver. In this way, if she walked a little further south, Nightingale would not be far from Denver. Coincidentally, Shitendaji's poison was a pathogen for Nightingale. After feeling the poison blown away by the explosion between Wu Ming and Ibaraki Doji's noble artifacts, Nightingale came to Denver with her obsession as a berserker. Since most of the poison in Denver had been blown away, Nightingale was able to find people or things that were more poisonous at the moment. And there was no doubt that Shitendaji was that poison. Then, Nightingale came to Gadatsi's side and used her noble artifact to resist Shitendaji's poison. What happened later, Wu Ming also knew about it. With her obsession as a pathogen, Nightingale, as a berserker, found Gadatsi just like that. Wu Ming could only smile and say, "That's really as expected of a berserker." Chapter 520. Wu Ming's group didn't waste any more time. In just an hour, they arrived at Riverton. This included Karna from the American faction and Tamamo no Mae from the Japanese faction. After all, the two of them were now on the same side, and Wu Ming didn't think it was a secret that Riverton was a gathering place for followers, so he brought them there. After returning to Riverton, Wu Ming briefly told Karen and Geronimo about what they had done, including how they were accidentally found by Nightingale, Karna's support, and how Tamamo no Mae had joined Wu Ming. Of course, when he introduced Tamamo no Mae, he introduced her as a partner. Although Wu Ming did benefit from Tamamo no Mae, there was no such thing as giving one's body in return for a favor, let alone a man giving his body to a woman. Although Wu Ming was a bit thick-skinned, he wouldn't do such a shameless thing. Asterisk cough cough asterisk. Let's not talk about other things, but with Karna joining us, we are already a lot stronger. After listening to Wu Ming's explanation, Karna nodded affirmatively. As an existence on the same level as his own disciple, Karna's strength could be said to be the best. Coupled with the memory of the Battle of the 14 Horsemen, Karna was relieved that this once troublesome enemy had become an ally. Sure enough, you also remember the Battle of the Holy Grail. Karna wasn't surprised to see that Karna knew him. Karna didn't think that he was special. Since he could remember the Battle of the 14 Horsemen, then the other followers in the Battle of the 14 Horsemen would certainly remember him. Hearing Karna's words, Karna smiled at Karna to show his friendliness. At this time, Wu Ming looked around and found that something was wrong. By the way, aren't there some people missing? Wu Ming looked at the followers in the room. It was obvious that there were some people missing. As for Elizabeth and the others, they ran into a little trouble. It's fine. Gadotsi coughed awkwardly. At this moment, Gadotsi was extremely embarrassed, and Matthew was beside her, looking like he was ready for battle. This made Wu Ming wonder if Gadotsi had a moral crisis just now. When Wu Ming told Geronimo and Sharon what happened, Gadotsi was attacked by Kaioheim. After that, Elizabeth, Robin Hood, and Billy Boy threw themselves at Gadotsi and shouted, Lady and Jun! Lady and Jun! Kaioheim was taken away, and the scene of Gadotsi being tightly protected by Matthew appeared. As if he had thought of something, Wu Ming no longer asked about it. Then, he asked about another person. What about Rama? He won't find trouble with Greece. Other than Elizabeth and a few other servants in the team, Wu Ming found it strange that Romo, the wounded, was not here. After a few days of rest, it was reasonable to say that Rama had almost recovered. Because of this, Rama should be here in such a situation. The only reason why Rama wasn't here was that he had gone to Greece to save his wife. That's right. Although Rama belongs to the ranks of the lone followers, the king is proud and arrogant. From the beginning, he had been searching for Cedo alone and did not accept our help. If it weren't for your serious injuries, we wouldn't have met again, Karen explained. And through this lesson, the king has also thought it through. He is no longer alone and has decided to join us, Geronimo added. And then he went alone again? Wu Ming wondered. Wasn't it obvious? Although he decided to go with everyone, in the end, he still went to Greece alone. However, Sharon shook his head. This time, he was not alone. Achilles went with him. In other words, after Achilles got rid of Nightingale, he returned to Riverton. Then, under Rama's strong desire, he listened to his teacher and accompanied Rama to Greece. Spartacus also went with them. Geronimo added and smiled. Wu Ming instantly understood Geronimo's smile and felt a little embarrassed. If Geronimo hadn't mentioned it, Wu Ming would have forgotten about him. Back then, he had used the pseudo-heavenly lock to tie Spartacus up and threw him into the woods. It seemed that Spartacus was finally found by Sharon and the others. As for Wu Ming's pseudo-heavenly lock, it was estimated that its magic power had been exhausted and broken. After all, it had been used for a long time. Without Wu Ming's magic power to replenish it, it was normal for it to break. Anyway, Wu Ming did not feel bad about it. After all, he still had a few pseudo-heavenly locks in his spatial relics. Let's not talk about Spartacus for now. If Achilles went with them, I'm relieved. Wu Ming was relieved. He did not want Rama to be killed again. Although Achilles was easily tied up by Wu Ming's trick as a demigod hero, Achilles was not to be underestimated. Not only did he have an almost invincible defense like Karna, but he also had many relics. For example, Achilles' shield alone was enough to block the most powerful relics of Karna and Wu Ming, which were comparable to natural disasters. Of course, although it would break after blocking for a while, it was enough for a battle that could end in a few seconds. Since Rama and the others had gone to Greece, let's work on both sides. Whether it was Sharon, Geronimo, Nightingale, or Karna and Tamuname, they all understood what Wu Ming meant. Are we going to have a final battle? Gadotsi also understood what Wu Ming meant. She was shocked. That's right. Wu Ming decided to end the mutation of this singularity as soon as possible. With the Celtic forces, the American forces, and the lone follower forces joining forces, and the Japanese forces withdrawing, Wu Ming felt that now was the best time to destroy both Greece and Rome. Wu Ming had always felt that the trap set by the Magician King at the singularity was not that simple. He felt that Shitendaji was not the only one who knew Wu Ming's identity and was targeting Wu Ming. The longer this dragged on, the more Wu Ming felt that something was going to happen. Sharon, Geronimo, what do you think? Wu Ming asked the two of them who were acting as the wise ones. I think we should slow down a little. After all, Rama and the others just left yesterday. They should be in Greece now, Geronimo said calmly. However, Sharon expressed a different opinion. I agree with Salander, but I suggest we only attack one of the forces for now. Chapter 5:21. Immediately afterward, Sharon began to analyze. And as far as we can see, our three-party cooperation can cause an overwhelming force to one of them. But if we deal with both forces at the same time, we will inevitably be suppressed by both sides. After all, although we have a large number of servants, if we deal with both forces at the same time, we will have to split up. Whether it's Greece or Rome, I don't think I'm a pushover, so I think we are likely to suffer losses. Wuming nodded. Sharon was right. If Wuming was not included, it could be calculated like this. The leader of the Celts, Maeve, had 3 servants, Finn, Dilmaud, and the unknown Indian servant. Needless to say, Maeve and the other Celtic servants were not weak. Although Silent Wonder had never seen the Indian servant before, he knew that the Celts were quite powerful since they were related to Rama. The American forces only had 3 servants. Needless to say, the leader Edison was very weak, and Helena could only be an auxiliary mage. The two's combat power was not high. Only Garna was strong, so they did not dare to act rashly. The leader of the lone servant force could be said to be Gadotsi, and there were a lot of servants: Matthew, Achilles, Sharon, Geronimo, Robin Hood, Billy Boy, Kyoheim, Elizabeth, Spartacus, and Rama. As for Tamamo no Mae, she was temporarily assigned to the lone servant force. Although they had the largest number of servants, there were not many who had strong combat power. Strictly speaking, only Achilles, Sharon, and Rama had first-line combat power, and the rest, whether it was Geronimo, Robin Hood, or even Billy Boy, they were not strong. As for Kyoheim and Elizabeth, well, if they were compared to Wuming, Garna, and others, they would be honest mascots. Well, if Kyoheim didn't shout Anjin Sama and Elizabeth didn't sing, they would become very popular. Tamamo no Mae's words were mentioned before. If she was summoned as a berserker or some other job rank, Tamamo no Mae would be able to unleash the terrifying power of one of the 3 great monsters. But now, she was just an ordinary witch fox. Lastly, if Spartacus could release his noble phantasm, he would be a very good troublemaker. However, he would be tied up in a few moves, so he could not be counted on. Moreover, even if he did release a precious artifact, it would be self-destructing and the price would be too great. Didn't you see that Caligula's berserker, who didn't have any powerful abilities, was stabbed by a noble phantasm? Although it was inappropriate to say so, in the face of a top-level servant like Wuming was certain that no one present, not even Sharon, would be able to survive if they fought with their lives on the line. Although it seemed like Wuming was a little arrogant, unfortunately, this was the truth. Rome is right. Since that's the case, let's split into 2 teams. Wuming decided to eliminate one of the forces first, and then attack the remaining forces. Immediately afterward, Wuming told everyone about his opportunity. They were still divided into 2 teams. The first team was led by Sharon and Geronimo. Robin Hood, Billy Boy, Kyoheim, Elizabeth, plus Edison and Helena, a total of 8 people. Their task was to go to the Roman camp and use all kinds of tricks to distract the Roman forces. The purpose was to delay the Roman forces and have no time to deal with the Greek forces. The Greek forces, on the other hand, were led by Wuming and other powerful servants to form the second team to eliminate them. Wuming returned to Washington first, and then led Maeve, Finn, and Dilmaud to Greece. Karna, on the other hand, was to join Rama, Achilles, and Spartacus to attack the Greek forces together with the Celtic forces brought by Wuming. For now, the Greek forces were much more difficult to deal with than the Roman forces. The Arcadian huntress, the divine magician, and the demigod hero were all stronger than the less mysterious Caesar, Cleopatra, and the others. Because of this, Wuming decided to gather powerful forces to eliminate the Greek forces first, and then attack the Roman forces. When Wuming and the other servants of the second team attacked the Greek forces, Sharon would lead the first team to entangle the Roman forces. Facing the less mysterious Roman forces, Wuming believed that Sharon and the others would not suffer any casualties. After all, they did not have to fight with their lives on the line. They just had to interfere with the Roman forces. That's a good plan. After all, even if we go to Greece with the second team, we won't be able to do much. It's better to go to Rome to interfere. Sharon agreed with the plan. The rest of the servants, Geronimo, Temamo, and Karna, also had no objections. At this time, Gadotsi spoke. That, Matthew and I, Gadotsi asked weakly. Matthew also nodded. They could not contact Chaldea at the moment, so Gadotsi and the others could only decide what to do next for the time being. Wuming pondered for a moment, then said, Tachika and Matthew, I originally wanted you to go with Sharon, but as the master, I have to ask for your opinion, so you can choose which team to follow. After hearing Wuming's words, Gadotsi and Matthew looked at each other. But it didn't take long for Gadotsi to speak under Matthew's affirmative gaze. Matthew and I will follow Teacher Ma's team. Then, Gadotsi stated her reason. After all, you have to fight for your life. If Matthew and I go, it may cause trouble for you. After all, Matthew is not good at attacking. Let Matthew and I go to Rome to interfere. Gadotsi said to Wuming with a smile. Although Gadotsi wanted to go with Wuming, she knew that she was a human master, and her servant Matthew was only a defensive type. Following Wuming and the others' attack team would inevitably cause trouble. Therefore, Gadotsi suppressed her desire and chose to go with Sharon and the others to Rome. It's really hard for you, Tachika. It's great that you can think like this, Wuming said as he touched Gadotsi's little head. Although Wuming could also protect Gadotsi, he was always somewhat restrained. Therefore, Wuming was really pleased that Gadotsi could choose to follow Sharon to Rome. It's nothing. I think if the doctor and the director were here, they would let me choose a team. Gadotsi smiled slightly, enjoying Wuming's touch. Retracting his hand, Wuming looked at everyone. Since the task has been assigned, then I will leave first. I will inform Edison to meet you here later. At that time, I will use Edison's communicator to talk to you. Later, Geronimo informed Elizabeth and others of the plan. They naturally had no objection, and they were quite excited, especially after Kyoheim knew that she and Gadotsi were in the same team. In this way, Wuming and Karna left together, and everyone was preparing for the upcoming battle. Chapter 522. Wuming and Karna left Riverton, but they were not going in the same direction. Karna was heading to the Great Lakes, which was the territory of the Greek forces, to look for Rama and the others. Achilles, Rama, and Spartacus set off during the day. According to Wuming's speculation, even if they were there, it was unlikely that they would rush into the Greek followers recklessly. Maybe they were just observing. After all, after this crisis, Rama also found the problem. Recklessness would not only fail to save his wife, but it would also put him in danger. After all, he was a king. Even if he was more impulsive when he was young, Rama was not ignorant. At present, there had been no movement from the Greek side, so Wuming judged that they had not made a move yet. This was good. Karna could meet up with them first, then lurk and wait for reinforcements. As for Karna's identity, Wuming gave him a Loon runestone, which contained a video recorded by Wuming, which was enough to prove Karna's identity. Besides, Achilles had also teamed up with Karna before, when they were 14 knights, so he knew that Karna would not lie. Therefore, Wuming was not worried about Karna's identity. In this way, Karna headed toward the northeast. Wuming, on the other hand, went south, preparing to use his assassin behavior to pass through the gap between Greece and Rome and return to Celtic. Coincidentally, although it was daytime when Wuming and the others attacked Jiro City, it was almost dark when they arrived at Riverton. The night was suitable for Wuming to sneak away. However, Wuming thought about it carefully and laughed. Not to mention that it would take too long to carefully rush back. Wuming had a portal. Wuming had to rely on himself before, because he had never been to those places. Now that he needed to rush back home, wouldn't that be putting the cart before the horse? Therefore, Wuming directly opened the portal and went to Washington. In the president's office in Washington, a black-purple spatial ripple appeared in front of the desk. Then, Wuming walked out of the portal. "You're back." Wuming let out a long sigh of relief, giving off the feeling of a wanderer returning home. However, Wuming chuckled self-deprecatingly. The feeling of home could only be felt in the root. After that, Wuming looked around the empty office. The office gave Wu-ming the feeling that no one had come here after he left. The books on the table were still the same as when Wu-ming left. Xiao Sai, you're back. At this moment, the door to the office suddenly opened. The person who called Wu-ming Little Sai was undoubtedly Maeve. Then, Maeve threw herself into Wu-ming's arms. I'm sorry, Maeve. I was delayed by something and came back late. Silent Wonder smiled at Maeve. His smile naturally contained an apologetic tone. However, Maeve didn't care. After shaking her head, she broke away from Wu-ming's embrace. Then, Maeve hugged one of Wu-ming's arms and said with a smile, It's good that you're back. If there were outsiders here, they would probably be scared to death by Maeve's behavior. Therefore, the cold, arrogant queen who didn't treat men as humans had become so gentle. She was many times gentler than before Wu-ming left. Even Wu-ming was shocked. Was it because they hadn't seen each other for a long time that led to the release of mental stress? Ahem. In layman's terms, absence makes the heart grow fonder. Wu-ming sat on the president's chair without the slightest bit of guilt. The poor president had already died. Wu-ming hugged Maeve, who was sitting on his lap, and began to tell her about his experience. Maeve, on the other hand, was listening attentively, her big eyes sparkling. In other words, as long as we join forces with the American forces and followers to eradicate Greece and Rome, we will win. Maeve smiled sweetly. Wu-ming nodded. Then he asked Maeve a little strangely, Maeve, why are you so happy today? Wu-ming asked. Since she came in, she had been very gentle until now. She was much gentler than the Maeve from a few days ago. Of course, she was still not as gentle as an ordinary girl, but this was not easy for Maeve. You can't expect a queen to be gentle. This was already a very gentle level for Maeve. Facing Wu-ming's puzzled question, Maeve hugged Wu-ming's neck and looked at Wu-ming's face and said happily, Because Sai took off her helmet. When Maeve said this, Wu-ming realized that he didn't wear his helmet anymore. No one knew when it started, but Wu-ming had taken off his helmet and maintained the appearance of only wearing white armor. Wu-ming would only close his helmet during the battle, but once the battle was over, he would take it off again. Although Wu-ming was used to it, Maeve was not. She had never seen Wu-ming's true face in this singularity. Of course, it didn't mean that Wu-ming covered his true face to make Maeve suspicious. After all, no matter who it was, if their lover always covered their face with a mask when they were with their other half, the other half would be very depressed if they couldn't see their lover's face. So, I won't wear a helmet in the future. How about that? Without apologizing, Wu-ming asked with a smile. With the relationship between the two, there was no need for an apology. Yeah, but no matter what, I like Little Sai. Maeve gently leaned in Wu-ming's arms and enjoyed this moment of peace. Wu-ming gently patted Maeve's back and enjoyed a moment of peace with Maeve. Sure enough, Maeve is actually just a little girl who lacks love. After a moment of tenderness, Wu-ming and Maeve left the office. After all, there was no time to lose. It was better to mobilize the troops and start the final battle. By the way, Sai, that Indian servant left our side. Left? What happened? Although leaving a servant was not a big deal for the current situation, Wu-ming still wanted to know the inside story. That servant is the hero of India, Achuna. He temporarily joined us on the grounds of following us to find Karna. Soon after he left. Wu-ming was taken aback. Achuna's mortal enemy was Karna. It seemed that he was still very persistent after death. No wonder he had some relationship with Rama. Rama was the 7th incarnation of Vishnu. Vishnu's 6th incarnation was the axe-wielding Rama, who appeared in the Mahabharata. It had some relationship with Achuna. But more importantly, the axe-wielding Rama was Karna's teacher. Karna's spear was transformed from the axe-wielding Rama's eternal blade. Wu-ming's heart suddenly skipped a beat. Karna won't meet Achuna halfway, right? Chapter 5:23. Maeve, gather Finn and the others and head to Chicago. I'll go check on Riverton. I have a feeling that Ajo and Karna have met. When it came to serious matters, Maeve was not ambiguous at all and immediately nodded. Wu-ming opened a portal and walked in. After Maeve saw Wu-ming leave, She reverted from a pretty girl to an incomparably domineering queen. She then gave an order to the Wooming guards outside. All troops head to Chicago. Outside Riverton town, a dark purple teleportation gate appeared. Wooming walked out. Although Wooming was going to Riverton, Wooming chose the place where he and Karna had parted. Wooming looked in the direction Karna had left. Lightning and fire kept appearing in the sky there. Wooming immediately took out his communication device and contacted Edison. Even if Karna and Ajo met, they wouldn't be able to determine the winner in a short time. "Hello, this is Thomas Edison." The Lionhead's deep voice came from Wooming's communication device. Listening to Edison's incomparably serious voice, Wu Ming was amused. Could you imagine a giant lion head seriously talking on the phone? "I'm Serene, President Edison." Wu Ming then told Edison to attack this place. Wu Ming also told Edison that Karna was with him. "Understood. I'll go to Riverton with Lady Helena immediately with the mechanical infantry," Edison said seriously. Edison said solemnly, and then hung up the communication device. Wu Ming smiled helplessly and put the communication device away. Wu Ming didn't go back to Riverton. Instead, he ran toward Karna, east of Riverton in the Missouri River Basin. At this moment, two godlike figures were fighting. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. Several bolts of lightning shot towards the running Karna from the top of a small hill. Bang, bang. Karna swung his spear and deflected the lightning arrows. The falling bolts exploded on the ground, creating many craters. Then, Karna condensed mana on his spear and swept it toward the small hill in front of him. Crack! Boom! Like cutting vegetables, the small hill in front of Karna was cut in half and then exploded by the mana contained in it. A dark-skinned figure flew up from the small mound, holding a strange bow in his hands. There was no doubt that the arrow that had attacked Karna was shot by him, and it had to be Ajo. Ajo wasn't worried about losing her cover. In the air, Ajo stood upside down and raised her bow. Karna shot a few more arrows. 5 lightning bolts attracted each other and shot toward Karna in the shape of a pentagram. This time, Karna didn't use his gun to knock away the arrows. Instead, he jumped at the moment the pentagon-shaped arrows were shot at him. Boom! The bolts landed on the ground, and the ground exploded. The strong wind blew Karna's white hair. Karna stood up and looked at Ajo, who had landed on the ground. While Karna was dodging the pentagram arrow, Ajona took advantage of the opportunity to flip over and adjust his position before landing steadily on the ground. Karna and Ajo stood opposite each other in the distance, giving off the feeling that they were about to negotiate. But unfortunately, neither Arzu nor Karna had the intention to speak. Ajo raised his bow and shot at Karna crazily with mana bolts. Karna, on the other hand, sprinted toward Ajo, swinging the indestructible blade in his hand to deflect the arrows. From the moment they met, they hadn't said a word and had been fighting the entire time. The surroundings were full of holes from their battle. It was like a natural disaster. That was what Wu Ming thought when he arrived. Seeing the two fighting again, Wu Ming sighed. "That black guy's Ajo?" Wu Ming asked in surprise. Ajo seemed to have heard him and glanced at Wu Ming. However, compared to Wu Ming, Karna seemed to be more attractive to him. Wu Ming smiled awkwardly. After all, he was caught talking bad about Ajo. However, Wu Ming didn't expect Ajo to be a black guy. Wu Ming didn't try to hide his presence. Therefore, not only Ajo, but Karna also noticed Wu Ming when Wu Ming arrived. However, because he was fighting with Ajo, Karna didn't greet Wu Ming. Both of them didn't care about the others around them and only cared about each other. While they were fighting, Wu Ming shook his head and got rid of the thought that Ajo was a black guy. Then, Wu Ming stretched out his hand and a holy light spear appeared. Mythical Yggdrasil. Whoosh! Along with the sound of a relic being released, Wu Ming threw out a small but bright light needle. Karna and Ajo, who were in the middle of their battle, naturally discovered the needle of light. Furthermore, they sensed a considerable threat from it and hurriedly retreated. Poof! The light needle disappeared as soon as it pierced the ground, leaving a small but bottomless hole and a sound when it pierced the ground. Wu Ming learned this move from the Star Cup's consciousness. By condensing the holy spear, although the attack range was reduced, the power was increased. Otherwise, Karna and Ajo wouldn't have dodged in a hurry. Instead, they would have used their weapons to deflect Wuming's light needle. However, the current result was what Wuming wanted. Wuming didn't want the holy spear to turn into a powerful light cannon. This time, he only used it to interrupt the battle between Karna and Ajo. Wuming dashed forward and came to Karna's side. Although Karna and Ajo had separated, their eyes were still fixed on each other. This made Wuming wonder if there was some unspeakable gay relationship between the two of them. Can't we not fight? Wuming didn't ask anything else and just asked this question. After all, they were about to start a war with the Greek forces. It would be difficult for them to lose a top fighter like Karna. I'm afraid not. Ajo and I are mortal enemies. I don't want to fight, but it seems that Ajo wants to defeat me. I'm afraid I can't help you. After hearing Karna's words, Wuming looked at Ajo. Wuming saw that Ajo's eyes were filled with strong fighting spirit and an incomparably persistent desire. It was obvious that he wouldn't let Karna go. There were only two ways to deal with Ajo. The first was to let Karna and Ajo fight. After all, if Wuming forcibly took Karna away, Ajo would definitely chase after him. Since Ajo could join the Celtic side because of Karna, it wasn't impossible for him to join the Greek side because of Karna. The Greek side would definitely warmly welcome a powerhouse who only wanted to fight Karna. While Wuming was thinking, Ajo was already impatient. What? You want to fight two against one? Even if that's the case, it doesn't matter. Fight me, Karna. Chapter 5:24. After Ajo finished speaking, she released her magic in a very imposing manner, causing the surrounding ground to crack. At this moment, Wuming finally had a chance to size up Ajona. Although his skin was dark, it revealed an incomparably healthy luster. Dressed in blue and white Indian Brahmin aristocratic clothes, this dark young man was full of character. Plus, he had a cold expression on his face. Wuming believed that ordinary girls in a modern world would definitely be smitten by Ajona. Wuming looked at Karna as if he had suddenly realized something. Was it because Karna was fairer than Ajona that Ajona was so stubborn about fighting him? I feel like you're thinking about something very rude, Karna said indifferently without even looking at Wuming. You're overthinking it, Wuming replied awkwardly. Of course he was joking. Wuming could understand why Ajona was pestering Karna. They were evenly matched, but because the opponent was in a difficult situation, Ajona, who had once sworn that he would not attack the opponent when the opponent was in a difficult situation, made his move. Even though Ajona's guidance was involved, in the end, Ajona still shot the arrow himself. That was the arrow that ended Karna's life, and also the arrow that would make Ajona suffer for the rest of his life. The hero Ajona had actually wanted to kill his archenemy in a murderous manner. That was too degrading. Although justice always belonged to the victor, Ajona still felt uneasy. Therefore, after turning into a heroic spirit, his wish was to fight Karna and defeat him with his own strength. Wuming had also thought it through. Let Karna and Ajona fight. After all, even if Wuming took Karna away, they would still end up fighting in the end. As for killing Ajona with Karna, Wuming had thought about it before, but first of all, it was inhumane, and second of all, this place was neither close nor far from Chicago. It would cause trouble sooner or later. Then, Wuming opened a portal. After exchanging a few words with Karna, Karna nodded. Then, he glanced at Ajo and walked in. Karna, don't even think about escaping. Arzu roared angrily. Don't worry, Achuna. Karna only left the Missouri River Basin. He only went to the northwest of the Cordillera Mountains. After all, there are few people there. You won't be disturbed. Then, Wuming moved the portal and pushed it in front of Ajo. You can find Karna again through this portal. Of course, you can choose not to trust me. The choice is yours. Wuming smiled, indicating that he meant no harm. However, in Ajo's eyes, this smile was extremely evil. He was having a good fight with his opponent, and you sent his opponent running away as soon as you arrived. Now you're even smiling. No matter how you look at it, it's a smile that's asking for a beating. Unfortunately, Wu Ming's charm wasn't as great as Karna's. Zhou merely looked at Wu Ming deeply and then entered the portal. Of course, Wu Ming wouldn't play any tricks. At this moment, Karna and Zhou were indeed in the northwest of the Cordillera Mountains. Then, Wu Ming took out his communication device and sent a message to Edison. Karna and Zhou are fighting to the death in the northwest of the Cordillera Mountains. You must avoid that place, pass through Denver from the south, and meet up with Chaldea's master in Riverton. After a while, Edison sent back a message. Putting away the communication device, Wu Ming took Karna's place and continued running toward Chicago. Let the two of them fight it out. By the time the victor is decided, Silent Wonder would have collected all 4 Holy Grails. The sun set in the west, and night gradually fell. Des Moines, a town on the Mississippi plains that was neither too far nor too close to Chicago. Because of the war, there weren't many people in the town. Also, because the sun had just set, there were only a few passers-by on the road. They all had bitter expressions and frowns. Some of the houses were damaged, and some were directly abandoned. No one cared about them. However, because this place was under the influence of Greece, it was relatively peaceful. Suddenly, a green figure flashed past like a shooting star. This made one of the passers-by wonder if he was hallucinating because of his long-term nervousness or if he had run into a ghost. Although the sun had just set, it was still considered night. Not wanting to think about it anymore, the passers-by quickened his pace and left. In every abandoned house in Des Moines, a red-haired young man stood in a house without any light, looking out the window from time to time. This person was Rama. Following the appearance of a green figure, Achilles appeared in front of Rama. "How is it?" Rama asked. "I found out. Those people have all gathered in Chicago because of a big hole in their spaceship. They haven't moved yet," Achilles said, rather displeased. "Speaking of which, we should just attack them directly. Is there a need to be so cautious?" Even Spartacus, who had been trying to attack Rama for some unknown reason, was released by Rama for being a hindrance. Well, actually, Rama just let him go with the flow. It would be best if he could affect the Greek side. After what happened before, I understand that if I want to take back Xido, I won't be able to do it rashly. I might even be killed. Rama closed his eyes and explained to Achilles. This was also the reason why Rama asked Achilles to scout for information. But why didn't he go himself? Achilles was the fastest to run. "I deserve to die. However, I can't die. I can't let Xido suffer. I must take back Xido. Before that, I must not die." Rama clenched his fist tightly. The metal gauntlet on his arm made a creaking sound because of Rama's strength. It could be seen how turbulent Rama's heart was. As expected, I still don't know anything about love. Can't we just fight our way through the enemy? Achilles pouted and complained. Even so, Achilles still followed Rama's instructions to scout for information. Sharon had told him that Achilles must listen to Rama's instructions and not charge into the enemy's base alone. As a teacher, Sharon naturally had ways to make his disciple obedient. After all, this was the talent of a teacher. After that, Achilles could only grumble helplessly before following Rama over. If that's the case, then what should we do next? Achilles dug his ears and asked Rama. "Attack." Rama paused for a moment and said, "Huh." Achilles suspected that there was something wrong with his ears. Otherwise, there was something wrong with the young king in front of him. Achilles thought, "You must be kidding, brother." Chapter 5:25. Without paying attention to Achilles' expression, Rama explained the reason. "At present, there is no monkey army to help me. The only servants who can fight are you and me. Therefore, attacking is the most reliable method at present." Rama said sadly. When he thought that Xido might have been killed, Rama's heart was full of uneasiness. The young Rama still had the courage to be foolish. After Rama finished speaking, Achilles' forehead showed the word V. "Isn't that the same as my previous proposal?" Achilles thought with a broken heart. Suddenly, a voice came. "I think you'd better wait a little bit." Who is it? Whether it was Achilles or Rama, they took out their weapons and were vigilant. "Don't be nervous." Then, accompanied by an optical camouflage illusion, Wu Ming's figure appeared in a corner of the dim room. Wu Ming said that the technology of the Mecha clan was still useful. "It's you." Achilles was quite upset. Then he put down his meteor lance. The Celtic Saint King. Rama was surprised, but after seeing that it was Wu Ming, he calmed down. After knowing that Wu Ming was also a king, although it was a pirated version, Rama's impression of Wu Ming became very good. Of course, a good impression was a good impression, and the fact that Wu Ming injured him could be forgiven. However, Rama still remembered the crime of negligently allowing his men to imprison Sito. Although they reconciled, they still had to remember the grudge. This was the young king Rama's decision in the face of Sito's matter. Rama, who was like a child throwing a tantrum, was not noble. As long as it concerned Sito, then Rama would not give in. "Why did you come here alone? Where is the master of Chaldea?" After all, he was also Rama's savior, so Rama naturally cared about him. "Don't worry, Edison has agreed to join forces with us. On the way back, we have joined forces with Karna to eliminate the Shitindaji who had gathered in Japan." Then, Wu Ming briefly explained to the two of them why Karna was a member of the United States, what they had been doing during this period of time, and their next plan. "I didn't expect Lancer to join Edison's camp. Life is really unpredictable." Achilles sighed. In the previous memory, they were clearly teammates, but in the end, they became enemies again. But in any case, because of the alliance, they became teammates again. That person is a hero who gave alms. "It's not strange for him to have such decisiveness," Rama said calmly. Although he and Karna did not come from the same story, Rama knew quite a bit about the hero who gave alms. "But I didn't expect the heaven-bestowed hero Ajo to appear at this singularity." Rama shook his head. Because of Wu Ming's explanation, the two also knew that Ajona had been fighting Karna all this time. They both sighed with emotion. Not only did Rama temporarily lose a combat power, but he also sighed that these two old enemies who loved and hated each other could appear at this singularity at the same time. That's why this is the Holy Grail. Such a miracle can also happen. Achilles smiled softly, thinking about how he and Sensei appeared together. After hearing Achilles' words, Wu Ming smiled. "Because of this, Rama, you can also meet Sito at this singularity, just like Karna and Ajo. These were all miracles brought about by the Holy Grail." Rama did not deny it all and nodded seriously. "Although I still can't meet Sito, as long as I know that she's still on this continent, I feel extremely at ease. Because Rama intervened in the Battle of the Monkeys and killed the enemy monkey, the dead monkey's wife put a curse on him. Even if you take back your wife, you can't really meet her. Because of this parting curse, Rama and Sito were separated again in the end, and it was a separation of life and death. This curse still accompanied the two. As long as they were too close to each other, one of them would gradually become weak, faint, and lose power until one of them left. Even if there's a curse, I will definitely find Sito," Rama said angrily. Even with such a curse, Rama still pursued Sito without hesitation, even if it meant death. "If that's the case, then you should listen to me and wait for a while." During Wu Ming's explanation, he also told the two of them about the joint attack of the American forces, the lone follower forces, and the Celtic forces on the remaining two forces. "If that's the case, I can wait. Anyway, I've been waiting for a day." Rama put away the eternal blade and sat cross-legged on the ground. "Fisk, really, both of them are so difficult to understand," Achilles complained as he walked to another room. Wu Ming smiled helplessly, although he asked for Modi. "By the way, why didn't I see Spartacus?" Wu Ming found Rama and Achilles through mana perception, but Wu Ming didn't find Spartacus mana in the surroundings. Could it be that he was already killed? Wu Ming thought mischievously. "That traitor! I have already banished him." Rama answered Wu Ming rather unhappily. "Banished? Could it be that Spartacus was attracted by the king follower and attacked Rama, but was then driven away by Rama?" Wu Ming looked at Rama's rather unhappy expression and thought that it must be so. "Forget it, I'll go find him. I don't want him to ruin my plan." After that, Rama and Achilles continued to stay in Des Moines, while Wu Ming left and embarked on the path to find the traitor. Although Spartacus' dexterity was D, even so, he was much faster than ordinary people. Therefore, he must hurry up and find him, if he was discovered or even captured by the Greek forces. Although it wouldn't cause a big impact, he was afraid that he would be used against Wu Ming and the others. First of all, Wu Ming looked for traces of Spartacus near Chicago. Of course, Wu Ming activated the Triumph armor in the assassin mode, so it wasn't easy to find him. Then he found some traces of Spartacus. Could it be that he was really captured? Wu Ming said helplessly. At this time, Wu Ming suddenly found another mana, which was the mana of someone Wu Ming had seen before. Does this mean that he wants me to go there? Wu Ming felt that the other party didn't have the slightest trace of concealment. He speculated that the other party was trying to attract him. Not afraid that it was a trap, Wu Ming quietly moved toward that place. Chapter 5:26. In just a few seconds, Wu Ming came to a small high ground where a girl with beast ears holding a bow stood there. She seemed to be admiring the moon. After Wu Ming saw the girl with beast ears, he also let go of the unnecessary vigilance in his heart, lifted the magic version of optical camouflage, and slowly walked out of the shadows. Since it's you, I don't think this is a trap, Atlanta. After Wu Ming finished speaking, the girl with beast ears turned around. This person was the famous huntress of Greece, Atlanta. You really believe me? You know I'm a huntress, Saber. Without looking back, Atlanta just closed her eyes and said in a flat tone, "Since you call me Saber, then you must have the memory of the battle of the 14 horsemen. I don't think you will repay kindness with ingratitude." Wu Ming chuckled. Indeed, the only saber that Wu Ming had ever served as was Sodric during the Battle of the 14 Horsemen, which also showed that Atlanta had that memory. And because Wu Ming freed Black Assassin Jack the Ripper, Atlanta owed Wu Ming a favor. It could be said that when the Argo encountered Wu Ming before, Atlanta pretended not to know Wu Ming and did not expose Wu Ming's information, which was considered as returning the favor. However, it did not mean that there was no friendship between the two after the favor was returned. And now, Atlanta contacted Wu Ming, which was the embodiment of this friendship. If you call me over like this, won't it attract Aisen's attention? Although I don't know him, I don't think that guy is very generous. Wu Ming walked to Atlanta's side and looked at the moon side by side. Although Aisen is indeed a useless guy, it is because of this that he will trust me completely and send me out to search the surroundings alone. However, it was also because Atlanta was suitable for investigation that Aisen sent her here. So, in other words, Spartacus was really caught by you. Otherwise, why would he send Atlanta to scout for no reason? Wu Ming really didn't know Aisen, but through historical records, in Wu Ming's opinion, with Aisen's timid temperament, he should keep all his combat power by his side, unless there was a special situation. And Wu Ming didn't think that Atlanta was sent by Aisen. It was Demetrius who spoke to Aisen, so Aisen sent me out. Sure enough. Wu Ming nodded and then continued to ask, "So, tell me the specific information about the Greek side." Immediately afterward, Atlanta briefly told Wu Ming about the servants on the Greek side. The leader of the Greek side, or rather, the person who obtained the Holy Grail, was Aisen. Therefore, the Search Argo was Aisen's precious artifact. The other servants on the Greek side were Archer Atlanta, Caster Medea, Berserker Hercules, Lancer Hector, and the captive Archer Xido. That guy seemed to have told Aisen that as long as he defeated the other forces and seized all 4 Holy Grails, he would be able to establish a country on this land that was separate from human history and would not be burned down by reason. Then, like a fanatic, Aisen began to fight for hegemony, Atlanta said with a disdainful look on her face. He didn't know if she was mocking the Magic King or mocking Aisen for believing the Magic King, who had cheated him so easily. I really don't know what Aisen is thinking. Back at the second singularity, he was already tricked by the Magus King, even though it was with the help of Demetrius. Wu Ming didn't know about this, and Atlanta didn't care whether Aisen was deceived or not, so they stopped talking about this topic. Well, I have understood the specific situation. So, why did you capture Xido? How could you threaten Rama with this? Isn't it a bit ridiculous? Rama might be controlled by others, but it was impossible for him to completely surrender to Ison. Moreover, Xido could take the initiative to die for the people when Rama was old. Perhaps when Ison threatened Rama with this, Xido would choose to commit suicide. In short, it was impossible. That guy did have such an idea. Atlanta said helplessly and disdainfully. Oh, I overestimated Ison. Wuming also smiled, but his smile was quite sarcastic. However, you can completely leave Ison's side. Why did you choose to stay? After all, there are not only Greek forces on the mainland. Wuming did not think that Atlanta would stubbornly follow Ison's side. Atlanta was not a good person, but in the face of righteousness, she would not choose to follow Ison's side. Indeed, when I was in Oceanos, I left Ison's Argo, but this time is slightly different. Atlanta shook her head. As a person who once participated in the Argo, when I was summoned by Ison using the Holy Grail, I was bound to his Argo. I can't leave this side. To put it simply, there was a master who didn't have a command seal. But this is not the whole reason. The main point is that Ison has a way to summon the demon god pillar. Wuming frowned. Shitendaji, who held the Holy Grail, also summoned the demon god pillar. Could it be that servants with the Holy Grail could summon the demon god pillar? Then, could Maeve, who held the original Holy Grail of this singularity, also be able to, using the Holy Grail, you can use a servant's spiritual base to summon a demon god pillar. But the summoned demon god pillar is more like a possession than a summon. Atlanta continued. Possession? That is to say, the demon god pillar needs to devour a servant to be able to descend? Wuming remembered the Judge Haim, who appeared when he defeated the demon god Shitendaji. He was afraid that the other party used the Judge Haim's spiritual base to summon the demon god pillar. Wuming's guess was right. Shitendaji used the unconscious Judge Haim as a medium to summon the demon god pillar. Because he used the Judge Haim's spiritual base, Shitendaji did not lose consciousness. She used the Holy Grail to split her consciousness in advance. And with the death of the main body as a trigger medium, she used the Judge Haim to summon the demon god pillar, and then fused a trace of consciousness in the Holy Grail with the demon god pillar. This was also the reason why the demon god Shitendaji made the sound of the demon god pillar in Shitendaji. Then, Ison captured Cedo. This is also the reason why Ison captured Cedo. If Cedo can't make Roromo submit, then it means that he is useless. Naturally, he can use Cedo to summon the demon god pillar. Atlanta's eyes were evil, as if she was ashamed to be in the same force as Ison. This is the most important reason why I didn't break away from the Greek forces. Chapter 5:27. Compared to breaking away from Greece, isn't it more suitable for you to lurk as an undercover agent? Wuming said for Atlanta. Atlanta nodded and then continued. Because I don't know how to be an undercover agent, I can be regarded as working for Ison wholeheartedly during this time, whether it's capturing Cedo or obeying orders to kill other servants. That was also the reason why Atlanta did not hesitate to place a noble phantasm on Wuming. Since the Argo was destroyed by her shot, Ison has been keeping the Argo in Chicago for the past few days and embedded the Holy Grail in it. With Demetrius' help, the Argo has become a grade A+ noble phantasm. It's more than enough to withstand the attack of a noble phantasm. Wuming smiled when he heard this. He was afraid that Ison was frightened by Wuming's shot, so he installed the Holy Grail directly on the Argo. However, because the Holy Grail was transferred from Chicago to the Argo, the Dragon Teeth soldiers could not be automatically mass-produced. These days, the Dragon Teeth soldiers were made by Demetrius herself. Not only the quality, but also the quantity has decreased a lot. In several battles with Rome, we can be said to be at a disadvantage. Wuming suddenly realized that the Holy Grail still had a lot of drawbacks. It could not mass-produce soldiers on the Argo. But because of this, Ison let me, Hector, and Hercules go to the battlefield together. We killed Julius Caesar and Cleopatra. At present, there are not many Roman servants left. Hearing this, Wu Ming's eyes lit up. This can be regarded as reducing the burden on us. Immediately afterward, Wu Ming told Atlanta about their plan to unite the three parties. I didn't expect you to be able to do this. Atlanta looked at Wu Ming deeply. Becoming the king of the Celts, destroying the Japanese forces, joining the American forces, and attacking Greece and Rome with the lone servant forces led by Master Chaldea. This really shocked Atlanta. If everything goes well, I'm afraid this singularity will be the fastest to solve among these singularities, Atlanta said thoughtfully. Atlanta herself had appeared at the second singularity before, so she naturally knew how quickly Gadotsi had saved the singularity. Based on this, he speculated that the other singularities should be similar. Indeed, counting from the time Li Xiang and the others entered this singularity, I'm afraid it hasn't even been a week. Although Wu Ming did not know how long it took Gadotsi to solve the previous singularities, Roman had told Wu Ming that it had been more than half a year since the anthropogenic fever. In other words, on average, it would take more than a month and a half to deal with the singularity. If all went well, Gadotsi would be able to resolve the singularity in less than a week. That was quite fast. While Wu Ming was thinking, Atalanta paused and spoke. By the way, is it okay to tell me about your chances? Atlanta meant nothing more than in case I'm a spy and deceived you, or accidentally leak your information. However, Wu Ming chuckled and shook his head. It doesn't matter even if you are exposed. After all, our plan is considered an open conspiracy. Gadotsi and the others' first team went to Rome. They did not expect to eradicate Rome, but it was enough to hold them back. Wu Ming and the others' second team would attack the Greek forces head-on. Before the attack, the Greek side would definitely notice something, so it did not matter if they were exposed or not. What's more, I don't think Atlanta is that kind of person. I believe that Atlanta, who loves children, no matter how her appearance changes, her inner heart is incomparably beautiful. With that said, Wu Ming reached out and touched Atlanta's beast ears. Because the distance was too close, Atlanta did not dodge and was caught by Wu Ming. Haha. Atlanta was shocked and quickly jumped away. What are you doing, you rude guy? Atlanta blushed, hugged her beast ears, and stammered. Sorry, I've been interested in your beast ears for a long time. It was just a spur of the moment. Wu Ming apologized with a smile, but the hand that was still floating in the air showed that Wu Ming was still thinking about the touch of Atlanta's beast ears. Atlanta blushed, gritted her teeth, and gripped the sky bow fiercely. Ahem, I have one more thing to ask of you. Wu Ming coughed and became serious. And it seemed that because Wu Ming had left a good impression on Atlanta, such a simple teasing was not enough to completely collapse the image built in Atlanta's heart. Atlanta touched the beast ears on her head, calmed her face, and nodded. But it was still very popular. Immediately afterward, Wu Ming made 2 runestones on the spot in front of Atlanta, but the runes on the runestones did not look like Lune runes. Immediately afterward, Wu Ming handed the 2 runestones to Atlanta. Hide these 2 runestones close to your body. Don't let Demetrius, the god magician, find them. After all, Kanagami magicians weren't the same as those weak magicians of modern times. Seeing Wu Ming's solemn face, she quickly took it and nodded solemnly. Then, because of the physical contact when she took the runestones, Atlanta blushed again. Even the night could not cover it. After all, there was moonlight. And with a pretentious, serious expression, Atlanta was very cute at the moment. However, Wu Ming also knew that it was business, so he did not tease Atlanta anymore. When Ison wants to use the Holy Grail to summon the demon god pillar, just pour your mana into these 2 runic stones. If possible, the closer you are to the Holy Grail, the better. Of course, I won't force you. Wu Ming instructed in a joking manner. I know. If there is nothing else, I will leave first. After Wu Ming nodded, Atlanta took 2 steps, but for some reason, she stopped again. By the way, Demetrius may have become the master of Spartacus. You know his noble phantasm. That self-explosion is not a joke. After all, Wu Ming and Atlanta Both had memories of the battle between the 14 knights. Naturally, they remembered the power of Spartacus' noble phantasm during the battle between the 14 knights. Are you concerned about me? Why don't you let me touch your beast ears again? Wuming smiled mischievously. Atlanta's face turned red in an instant, and she quickly left here. After Atlanta left, Wuming's mischievous smile disappeared. Looking at the gradually rising moon, Wuming always felt uneasy. At this time, Wuming found that something was wrong. The sky is not normal. Chapter 528. People said that waiting was the longest, but it was not the case for the servants. After putting away the communication device with Edison, Wuming went to the window and looked at the moon. At that moment, the moon had reached the western sky. It should be 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. Edison told me that they have met up with Tachika and the others and set off for Rome. Wuming said to the shadow behind him. Rama and Achilles came out from the shadow. Finally, it's going to start fighting. It's very uncomfortable to be here all the time. Achilles bit the bristle grass that he found from God knows where. I'm just as upset as you are. As long as I think about fighting side by side with the Celtic servants, my heart is extremely irritated. Rama put one hand on the eternal blade on his waist, and the other hand clenched his fist. Wuming knew what Rama meant. The enemy who imprisoned his wife was now going to rescue his wife with the enemy. Rama's heart must be quite restless. After all, Rama and Wuming had reconciled, but he did not reconcile with the other Celtic servants. It could be said that if it were not for Wuming's repeated advice and a hint of pleading, Rama, the childish king, would definitely not agree. This time, I'm giving you face. Remember this, humph. Rama snorted and turned his head. I think you're doing this for the sake of saving your wife. Of course, that sentence could only be thought. Wuming did not dare to say it out loud. Otherwise, who knew what kind of trouble this young king would cause? So, when will the Celtic servants arrive here? Achilles asked. Wuming smiled slightly. They have arrived. The moon was covered by clouds, and the earth fell into darkness. On the eastern plains outside Chicago, a large shadow moved toward Chicago with the help of the darkness. Atlanta stood on the city wall, her eyes focused. Even a moonless night could not cover the sharp eyes of the huntress. Celtic people, Atlanta said softly as if deep in thought. She then jumped, left the city wall, and returned to the city of Chicago. Without a doubt, she had gone to inform Ison. It's time for me to come out. Defending the city is my specialty. After Atlanta left, a middle-aged man carrying a javelin that was much longer than an ordinary javelin walked to the city wall. Gradually, a gust of wind blew, and the dark clouds in the sky that were blocking the moon were blown away. The moonlight illuminated the land. Countless soldiers with the same face advanced toward the city of Chicago in an orderly manner. Even Hector couldn't tell how many soldiers they had. The only two things that stood out from the rest were the 3 servants with weapons in their hands at the front of the army and a luxurious ox cart pulled by 2 divine bulls in the middle of the army. I didn't expect Queen Maeve to personally come to the battlefield. Hector scratched the back of his head, seemingly feeling helpless about the situation. Even though Greece had always been at war with Rome, it did not mean that they had never fought with the Celts. In fact, what Wuming didn't know was that whether it was the Celts, Greeks, or Romans, they had killed or injured each other. However, because it was only a battle between a single servant, the information was not circulated. Of course, from a general point of view, some information that was not so secret was still known. For example, the leader of the Celts was Maeve because she never deliberately hid herself and even publicized it. Therefore, Hector concluded that Maeve must be sitting in the luxurious ox cart. For a woman like Maeve who thought highly of herself, it was natural for her to do such a thing. Of course, Hector didn't know Wuming's information. Not to mention that Wuming was summoned less than a week ago, Maeve didn't deliberately publicize it. Of course, this was Wuming's idea. Then those 2 spearmen must be Celtic warriors. How valiant! They didn't let a single dragon fangs go and quickly ambushed here. I wouldn't do something like that. Hector smiled bitterly as he spoke faintly. Just like what Hector said, Greece's territory was full of Dragon Fang soldiers, and the Celts were able to sneak into Chicago in the middle of the night without being discovered. This was undoubtedly due to the help of the servants. I really hope it's as simple as defending the city. Uncle is very clumsy about other things. After sighing, Hector began to command the Dragon Fang soldiers to prepare for the enemy's attack. Not far from Chicago, Finn waved his hand, and the entire army stopped in place as if they had received an order. This was the privilege of the Holy Grail's generals. Now, the enemy must have discovered us. The next command will be handed over to the Queen, Dilmund. Finn said lightly, "Yes, my lord. I will go and greet the Queen." Dilmund bowed to Finn and then walked to the rear. Just as Dilmund said, he was ready to welcome the Queen's carriage. To be able to let the army arrive here without being discovered, your wisdom is really terrifying. Next, it's time to show my bravery. Fergus grinned. Finn had a good impression of this big guy. Well, after all, they were both Celts. Then I'll have to trouble the magic sword envoy to take the lead. In just a moment, the ox cart came from the center of the army to the front line. "Ah, we're here already, Finn. Good job." A noblewoman's voice came from the carriage pulled by the divine ox. "Our army has arrived in Chicago, and the enemy has discovered us. So, when will His Royal Highness, the Holy King, appear?" Finn asked politely. "Your Holy King is on the other side of the city. I can feel it." In the carriage, Maeve took off her white silk gloves and looked at the bright red dragon-like pattern on the back of her hand formed by 3 command seals and smiled. "Then, let's have Fergus break the city gate." "No problem, right?" Maeve said to Fergus outside the carriage. "Of course, no problem. How can a Celtic man say no?" After saying that, Fergus walked forward with the magic sword spiral sword on his shoulder. After the Holy Grail's treatment, Fergus had completely recovered, and now he was full of energy. On the city wall, Hector looked at the man walking forward with a magic sword. He had already guessed what he was going to do. He's going to attack the city with a noble artifact. What a headache. Then, when Hector noticed that Fergus' noble artifact was getting brighter and the magic power was getting thicker, Hector retreated. "Uncle, you can't stop it. This is already a noble artifact that's comparable to a city's noble artifact. Let's escape first." Then a rainbow-colored light exploded after Hector left the city wall. Chapter 529. All right, I feel like I'm full of energy today. I'm sure you'll be satisfied with this shot. Fergus raised his neon sword and laughed. One had to know that the A and A+ were not eye-catching individually, but when they were combined, it was no joke. "Then hurry up. If it wasn't for your relic, I would have asked you to leave earlier." Maeve's impatient voice came from the carriage. Naturally, by leaving the stage, he meant that he had died. Also, although I don't mind you taking advantage of me verbally, I would be happy to see little Sai kill you. "Oh, my apologies, Your Majesty." "Don't worry. I'm sure His Majesty will be satisfied with this shot." "I hope so." Maeve's lazy voice sounded. The neon sword in Fergus's hand began to glow. Fergus stabbed the neon sword into the ground. Calibulb! In an instant, a rainbow-colored light extended from the neon sword to the city walls of Chicago. Boom! In an instant, a rainbow light burst out of the ground and blasted the city walls of Chicago. Countless Dragonfang soldiers were directly destroyed and turned into dust. Those Dragonfang soldiers that were lucky enough not to be turned into dust were also scattered into small pieces of bone. "Ah! This is truly spectacular." Fergus laughed heartily as he raised the rainbow sword. It had to be said that Fergus was really full of energy. After releasing the relic that doubled his power, he was still in high spirits. Finn and Dilmund watched this scene calmly. After all, this scene was nothing to them. Maeve, who was sitting in her beloved chariot, nodded in satisfaction. Then, she gave an order. "Everyone, attack." At this moment, an irrational roar was heard. Asterisk, 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 asterisk. On the west side of Chicago, which was the opposite side of Maeve's army. Wu-Ming, Rama, and Achilles arrived. When the three of them arrived, they saw the explosion on the east side of Chicago. "That's the demonic sword envoy's precious artifact," Rama said. "The person who understands a person the best is not his friend, but his opponent." Back then, Rama had fought Fergus to the death for the sake of Cedo. Naturally, he knew about Fergus' noble artifact. That should be the case. Fergus' noble artifact was still vivid in Rama's mind. To be honest, I had originally wanted to end that guy directly. At this moment, Wu-Ming spoke. Both Rama and Achilles looked over. If there are no restrictions, he will do as he pleases. For a king, this kind of teammate is very annoying. Wu-Ming smiled coldly. At this moment, Rama and Achilles finally felt the pressure brought about by Wu-Ming. No matter how kind this guy was, he was still a berserker. No matter how close he was to the people, he was still a king. All in all, Wu-Ming was not a kind man. He would not hesitate to do things that would bring him enough benefits. However, Wu-Ming still had his own bottom line. As the Origin Dragon, Wu-Ming would definitely become 10,000 times more noble than Gaia Aleya in the future. He was destined to never be the same as an ordinary person, which was why he treated everything with reason. That was why people often said that the heavens were heartless. Moreover, have you ever seen Wu-Ming hesitate or worry when he killed someone? Although it was a pity, why would a human feel sad when he crushed an ant to death? That was the reality. Take Nazalik, for example. The people in it were all demons. If it was not for Wu-Ming deliberately suppressing them, they would have been destroyed. However, Wu-Ming would still not do anything to them. Firstly, they were Wu-Ming's subordinates. Wu-Ming had mistakenly entered and became the supreme king. Therefore, he had to be responsible. Secondly, if there was good, there would be evil. Wu-Ming would not purposely punish the evil. Cough, cough. However, if they provoked Wu-Ming, Wu-Ming would not mind getting rid of the weeds. Just like Darius, who wanted to capture Mayu. Other than that, Wu-Ming was more fond of humans. Because Wu-Ming was just adopted by humans, he was a human for a period of time. Therefore, he was more fond of humans, especially those who were considered good by Wu-Ming. If he had the ability, Wu-Ming would definitely help. Rick was a good example. Wu-Ming specially went to Rick's world and helped the humans to turn the situation around. If possible, Wu-Ming still liked to stay with humans, because the possibilities and emotions of humans made Wu-Ming very happy. And Wu-Ming wanted to kill Fergus. Well, regarding this point, Wu-Ming only wanted to kill Fergus because he had flirted with Maeve before. But no matter what, he is still my subordinate. It is better to keep him alive. Just like that, the topic ended. Let's go. Maeve has already started. We can't fall behind. Saying that, the three of them walked towards the west wall of Chicago. Wu-Ming started to move. On Maeve's side, there was a small problem. Hercules let out a confused roar as he swung his axe and sword at Fergus. Bang! The ground that was hit by Hercules cracked. As for Fergus, he naturally dodged this attack. Hey, why are you attacking me directly? You think too highly of me. Although Fergus was still running his mouth, his expression had become serious. Fergus was also holding the neon sword with both hands. Dillman, be careful. This big guy is not to be trifled with. Finn held his spear and looked warily at Hercules, who had pulled out his axe and sword from the ground. Yes, my lord. Dilmod also raised his red and yellow spears and stood beside Finn. My brave warriors. Maeve didn't even walk out of the carriage. With just one sentence, countless Wu-Ming face soldiers rushed toward Hercules. However, even if they were strengthened by the Holy Grail, the small fries were still small fries. For a great hero like Hercules, they were basically useless. Hercules roared at the sky. Even if he didn't have magic to release this skill, the roar mixed with magic alone was enough to shock the nearby soldiers to death. Then, Hercules rushed into the crowd of soldiers and began a massacre. At this moment, Hercules could only be described with 4 words. Unparalleled mowing. Accompanied by a roar, a drill-like spiral sword attacked Hercules from behind. Clang! Hercules easily blocked Fergus' attack with his axe and sword and slapped Fergus away. With a mind's eye skill, Hercules naturally wouldn't be ambushed successfully. This is a little tricky. Fergus stabilized himself as he flew away and broke out in cold sweat. When Fergus was sent flying, Finn and Dilmond also rushed forward. With the two of them together and their flexibility as spearmen, they could slightly restrain Hercules. However, they still couldn't cause much damage to Hercules. Let's release the noble artifact again. With that, Fergus raised his magic sword. However, at this moment, a rather deranged voice was heard. Aha, oppressor! Oppressor! You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.